across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
There is a God. Welcome to the home of common sense. Andy Burnham has vowed to be a circuit breaker for Britain in his first speech as Prime Minister, promising the biggest changes in 40 years and pledging to drag power out of Westminster and into every postcode in the land. Noble, if not a little bit Brenty words. What are your assessments so far? Will Andy Burnham fix Britain? Keir Starmer used his final speech as Prime Minister to declare his work was done, really, insisting he left Britain in a better state than he found it, calling his premiership the privilege of his life. And Boris Johnson has blamed Remainer civil servants for the so-called Boris wave of mass migration, claiming that Whitehall officials feared Brexit would turn Britain into a leper colony and deliberately open the doors to European workers, whilst admitting his own government failed to shut it fast enough once the scale became clear. We'll have details on all of this, everything you need to know, and all the breaking news. Will Andy Burnham fix Britain? Your thoughts on that. So, let's have a think about where we're at. It's goodbye from him.
My work is done.
Thank the Lord. And it's hello to him.
Britain needs to show the world that we can regain our stability once again. We have not been good enough, and we need better. We will be.
We will be. Will you? Will you, Andy? Our fifth Prime Minister in 4 years. Blimey. And, well, look, we want him to succeed. But will this one be any different? Andy Burnham, the new head honcho, the speed this all happened, I know this is a well-trodden debate already, is actually breathtaking. 1 minute he was Mayor of Greater Manchester. What, a month and a bit ago he wasn't even an MP. The next he's holding keys to number 10 without the country ever really having a chance to scrutinise him in a prospective prime ministerial arena. Nothing at all. We really know very little. Not his fault, but it is his problem. We do know about digital ID. Do you know the first thing when I heard he'd scrapped digital ID was, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I think it might be on hold. I think they might have kicked it into the long grass. But the systems, the IT, the infrastructure that's been put into place for digital ID already, there's hundreds of billions. There's no way that is just disappearing. The truth is, we know very little, of course, about what an Andy Burnham government will look like. Beyond those kind of broad slogans and a reputation for competent local leadership, the public has yet to see a fully formed vision of any of this. Even more interesting is the collection of advisors and allies and personalities he's got surrounding him. There are absolutely dozens of them. Some experienced, other a bit unconventional, and a few appear to pull in completely different ideological directions. That breeds uncertainty at precisely the moment that markets, businesses and voters crave confidence. That's fair, right? He has no honeymoon. He will have no honeymoon, none whatsoever. Every decision from today onwards will be judged through the prism of whether he looks like a Prime Minister or simply a politician promoted in a hurry. Within 100 days, people will expect it's this tight, tangible progress on immigration, the economy, the NHS and living standards. Excuses about inheritance will wear remarkably thin, remarkably quickly. He won't have that card to play. He wanted the job at speed. He got the job at speed. Make it happen, Mr. Burnham. History rarely remembers how leaders arrive. There's almost, you'd be hard-pushed these days to find footage of Mrs. T turning up in Mr. Blair, Johnson, Cameron, May, Truss, Sunak turning up. See, loads of them leaving. So history doesn't judge this day in any acute manner. But he does start from a position where it's not a general election. He's taking the reins. He's made bold, broad brush points about what he wants the place to look like, absolutely obsessed with taking the power out of Westminster, as if anybody ever felt that that's where it was. I mean, the power is there in the sense that that is the building that MPs work in. You can't apologise for that unless you put it somewhere else, and then you surely create the same problem. So that's all a bit pants, frankly, that stuff, but see what he does. He's going to apparently do 1 day a week in Manchester. Good luck with that in the midst of a crisis. He has also broken a promise already. His first U-turn has happened. Did you spot it? Apparently he was going to be wearing a T-shirt for his inaugural day, a T-shirt. What did he turn up in? A suit. And a tie. He's got the whole thing going on. That's a U-turn, right? Andy Burnham U-turn #1. He was going to wear a T-shirt. You're not Zelensky, mate. Stick a jacket and a tie on. You're the Prime Minister. Let's get to work with Alex Dean, political commentator, good friend of the show. Alex, good afternoon to you.
Good to see you, Ian. Day one.
Day one. How are you feeling? Is there a sort of vibrant optimism that's threading its way through every sinew of your being right now?
So I agree with you on the main point about today. We wish him well. He's now our Prime Minister. It's our country's fate in his hands. So, of course, whilst I'm in a different political party, I hope it works. I disagree with you on one point. We do remember one thing about Margaret Thatcher becoming Prime Minister, because she recited that Francis of Assisi poem. She did. Where there is discord, may we bring harmony, and so forth. But I will say he gave a good speech, right? He delivered it well. This is the point of Burnham, right, as far as anyone can tell, that he's a better communicator than those who came before him in the Labour Party. So it's not a bad first day, but it's like the drunk has come in upstairs and you're still waiting for the other shoe to drop. We're going to see who he appoints to his cabinet. Yeah. And that's going to be the real sign of what's to come.
One would have thought that stuff... I mean, certainly the markets need to know, right? I mean, this isn't something that is just down to a guy spending 3 days. We need to know who the Chancellor is going to be quite quickly.
That's right. And in the last week, I've seen authoritatively said, reputable titles say, the Chancellor is going to be Yvette Cooper, the Chancellor is going to be Ed Miliband, and the Chancellor is going to be Shabana Mahmood. Yeah. So whilst it looks like Mahmood is front runner as of this morning, I'm not going to put any money on it. But let's just reflect on the fact, Ian, that with more than 400 MPs, it looks like the new Chancellor is going to be somebody with zero economic experience. Rishi Sunak was the first Prime Minister younger than me. You know, that's what alcoholics call a moment of clarity. When you suddenly realise, like policemen getting younger, you know, he was the first Prime Minister younger than me. Shabana Mahmood, if appointed, will be the first Chancellor of the Exchequer with less economic experience than me, and indeed less economic experience than you or any of your viewers. Sure. No footprint at all, no time in business, no managing a P&L. So look, again, I hope it works, but this is really high stakes.
Yeah. Well, let's have a reminder of a little snippet of that speech he gave just moments ago outside number 10.
Britain needs to show the world that we can regain our stability once again. We have not been good enough, and we need better. We will be.
Well, I mean, what he's doing here, or attempting to do, is a bit odd, Alex, and the ambition is, I suppose, to be applauded. If he can get everybody feeling better about their lives, that's great. If he can address all manner of issues that he's talking about addressing, that's great. But these are sort of platitudinous moments, aren't they? Every prime... Remember Boris Johnson, I will finally solve the crisis of social care. Things like that.
Oh, you're absolutely right. We are still in, you know, motherhood and apple pie, the message of hope. But look, this is day one, and one of the things one should acknowledge is it's very hard to reboot mid-term. Yet we've talked about the ruthlessness with which the Labour Party took down Keir Starmer and has moved in Andy Burnham. Well, you know, on one view, that's actually to their credit, that they're able to do that, bring in the person they think is the right leader, rather than being stymied. If we just trod on water for another 3 years with Keir Starmer, I'm convinced we'd have been on the right path. Now I just suspect we're on the right path, the wrong path. And that is, you know, that's a significant improvement. With Starmer, we would definitely have been heading towards a worse direction. With Burnham, the jury is still out. There is one point I will make from his speech, though. He's talking about a 10-year plan. The last Prime Minister we had that got 10 years was Tony Blair. Yep. You know, we are in an era where we discard our political leaders very, very quickly. And I think he might be sensible to adopt his time horizon rather more briefly than the one he's setting out now.
Yeah, because he said that would mean he's got to obviously continue in this Parliament till 2029. Then he's got to win the next one and the one after that.
Well, I mean, we had a general election in 15, 17, 19, right? And the 1924 Parliament was relatively unusual in going the full term. They had such an enormous majority that they're quite unlikely, I think, to go to the polls before 28, 29, when they now have to at the end of this Parliament. But he's got more than 400 MPs, and that is actually a burden in some ways. Very difficult to manage. Lots of them think they should be having jobs that they haven't got, and lots of them know they're unlikely to be re-elected. So one point of caution here about his 10-year timeline, it's not even certain he leads the Labour Party into the next election. You know, killing leaders is habit forming. It becomes increasingly your tradition that you think that this person's wrong, get rid of them, move on to the next man or woman. And by the way, the Labour Party's still never been led properly by a woman.
Sure.
So I think he should really run very scared of overconfidence here. One of the things Keir Starmer didn't do was nurture his relationship with his backbenchers. He thought his majority was so big he didn't need to worry about it. And that's why he's out the door today. So I hope Andy Burnham is heeding that message, which is all the harder because he wasn't in the Commons when it was being delivered.
Indeed. Well, let's go back to how this all started. It was Keir Starmer. He's now given his final address, which he did just before an hour before Mr. Burnham did. He's no longer the Prime Minister, remains an MP, of course. He said it was the privilege of his life. Let's have a listen to those final words from Keir, and tissues at the ready, please.
My work is done. In 6.5 years, I took our party from a historic defeat in 2019, changed it so it was fit to face the country, and won a landslide general election victory in 2024. Since then, it has been the privilege of my life to serve you and this great country as Prime Minister. And I am confident that Britain is now stronger and fairer than it was 2 years ago. Our economy is stronger. Our public services are on the up, with the biggest fall in waiting times for 17 years. Children are being lifted out of poverty every single day. Immigration is down significantly. Our defence and security are on a far stronger footing, and our international reputation is greatly enhanced.
I'm not sure about the last three on that list, Alex.
About any on that list, but I certainly the reputation. I mean, trying to give away the Chagos silence might impress Mauritius, but I don't think much impresses the rest of the world. The impoverishing of our economy for aggressive environmental targets. I've never understood why making ourselves weaker is going to impress China. So I put a big question mark on that one too. But I will say one positive, both about the Starmer remarks and Burnham, how nice it is to be able to hear them without some idiot bellowing over them again and again. I know I'm a free speech advocate, as you and I have discussed in the past, but there's no right to have a loudhailer right in front of some of our nation's most significant moments. And I'm very, very glad, whilst it's long overdue, they finally shut up that Steve Bray guy.
Yeah, I wonder if he'd been planning it. You know, maybe got on to the people that make the big Bluetooth ones and ordered an absolute mega thing ready for today, and only to be told his company would not be conducive with the public good.
Well, it does show that Burnham's thinking fast, or the people around him are, because they will have watched the Starmer resignation speech, not this one, but he's given several. He's like Sinatra, he's got farewell after farewell. But the one he gave when he acknowledged the inevitable and said he was going, where the noise was just being over. Whatever you think of Keir Starmer, it was our Prime Minister making a speech of some significant public import, and you couldn't hear a word he said because Burke was broadcasting his own choice of noise over the top. So I'm really glad. As a day one thing, I think it's a very good sign of things to come.
Interesting times. What do you think Keir Starmer is likely to do? I mean, there's talk of him giving up his seat and in Holborn and giving it, or allowing David Miliband to stand.
Well, that really might happen. I mean, former prime ministers are an interesting challenge, and I know as a Tory, because we've got lots of them, but the traditional position for a former prime minister who is in good standing in his party is foreign secretary. Well, that's obviously not going to happen. He's not going to be the Douglas Hume who goes in and signs treaties for Britain and negotiates for some years, as that former prime minister did. In fact, he's not going to feature in the Burnham team at all. So you're looking at a much more akin to Ted Heath hanging around grumpily.
Yeah.
And that's no good for anyone. So actually, whilst it will cause yet another by-election, and the good people of Holborn and St Pancras will no doubt be frustrated by that, I think it's actually for the best that he clears out. After that, what he does, very good question. There was some idle speculation from no doubt supporters of his suggesting he was going to go to the NATO Secretary General role. Well, one, there's not a vacancy and is unlikely to be one. And two, he's palpably a bad candidate if he tried.
that
So
job, yeah.
I don't think that that's going to happen. So, and he's not exactly the most magnetic of speakers, so I don't think the after-dinner circuit is beckoning. But he is a plausible figure. And I think something in the international environment where, let's be honest, he did a good deal better than he ever did domestically as Prime Minister. Something in that world feels right. You've seen him showered with honours by foreign regimes in the dying days of his administration. I think something on the international stage would be sensible. And indeed, a bold move would be Andy Burnham making him ambassador to a major nation. Given that it caused him so much grief, the ironic one would be the United States to fill the role left by Peter Mandelson at some point. But any major country, I think Keir Starmer would be a plausible voice for our government and the party that he used to lead. So we discard prime ministers far too easily. We throw them onto the trash heap while they've still got life in them. And I think this is a bipartisan point. The right of politics does it as well. You should find some role for them, and I hope he finds one. Just not Prime Minister again, please, and nothing to do with NATO.
Indeed. Alex, stay with us. Alex Dean, political commentator, former parliamentary candidate too for the Conservatives. More from him in a couple of moments. And from you, will Andy Burnham fix Britain? I mean, that was broadly. We haven't got the finer detail, but he's made no secret of the idea that he wants to kind of recalibrate, rewire, if you like, and deconstruct 40 years of how this country has done business. Now, what does he mean by that? What are the specifics on this? He's going to help everybody feel a bit better off. I mean, these are big remarks. Solutions are a little trickier. Will Andy Burnham fix Britain? That's the first question. 0344 499 1000. And secondly, just give us your overarching feelings on today. Starmer gone, Burnham in, wasn't an MP literally a few weeks ago, and now is the Prime Minister. Your thoughts on everything you've seen so far today. 19 minutes after 1, this is Talk.
I spoke to the Chief Constable of Devon and Cornwall Police 3 times. I spoke to the Prime Minister as well, and those calls took place over Friday and Saturday, and they both told me it's a burglary that's gone wrong. I said, no, it is not. A burglar does not park his car on your drive and walk into the house. And I went to Dartmoor on Saturday and I said, I have no doubt this is a premeditated murder. I received tons of abuse for saying it, but sadly, it's proved that I'm right.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Pedro in Telford says, everyone is saying how good an orator Andy Burnham is. His delivery reminds me of a 5-year-old speaking whilst moving their finger from word to word. At least foreign interpreters should find it easy to translate. It's a good point. I think he sounds accessible rather than a great orator. He's not a great orator. There's nothing, that's never been said. You know, before all of this happened, a couple of weeks back, and nobody had really, half the country had never heard of Andy Burnham, and the ones that had never considered that he might suddenly become the Prime Minister very quickly. Nobody ever had Burnham down as a great politician or a great orator or anything for that matter. His name never came up. We could debate who would be the ideal person to take over, run the country. Nobody ever said Andy Burnham, ever. It's not a sentence. But what he does have, he's got a bit more of a common touch, and that will arguably play out well for him, but not necessarily with everyone. Alex Dean is with us, talking through the big stories of the day. Alex, and let's have a look at this. Ramping up the security for MPs would be expensive and pointless, says Boris Johnson, a man I imagine still carries a security brief around with him as a former Prime Minister. Doing it for every MP would be tricky, wouldn't it? This was largely a reform suggestion.
Yeah, and I understand why they've made it, given that their immigration spokesman was just brutally murdered in her own home, and their leader is very regularly either verbally threatened and abused or physically, milkshakes and otherwise. But there is a point about the enormous cost. I mean, we don't have the sort of trained, specialised police officers to go round even a tenth of Parliament. So to suggest that you're going to do all 650 MPs in one go is a tall order. And furthermore, members of Parliament are meant to represent us, are meant to be quite accessible to us. So I feel uncomfortable about that part. But the flip side is that the reason you mentioned I was a Conservative Party candidate at the last election, that was because my predecessor, Mike Freer, a first-class MP and honourable man, was forced out of public life by death threats, amongst others, from the man who went on to murder Sir David Amess, Ali Harbi Ali. And our association office in the constituency was set on fire by different people, but the Christmas before the general election in 2024. So I am acutely aware of the threats that our members of Parliament face, by proxy, of course. I haven't had anything like that myself. I'm saying I've seen the impact that it has on public life. We've got to try and find a balance here. And I think that balance probably sits somewhere between the status quo, where members of Parliament are, in my view, woefully underprotected, and the full-blown security apparatus that reform is suggesting. There's got to be room in between those two poles for some form of middle ground. And for me, the first middle ground would be much closer analysis of threats of substance, not triviality or, I hate you, but people who monitor where their MPs are and lurk outside constituency offices for a day, or stalk them through surgeries, or repeatedly write abusively to them. Looking more closely at those things, it seems to me, might help to be part of a middle ground between our MPs being removed from us and not really being part of the normal life that we want them to experience and understand anymore, and not being protected.
It's increasingly tricky. Boris Johnson says what he would rather see happen would politicians dial down increasingly coarse or aggressive rhetoric to produce political violence.
That's daft. And look, I'm a Boris loyalist. I was the last Japanese soldier on my jungle island doing media saying he shouldn't resign. I did Good Morning Britain on the morning he went. About an hour afterwards, he resigned. But I'm afraid that suggestion's for the birds. All political sides are engaged in a deeply rhetorical debate. That's what politics is like now and is going to be for the foreseeable future. And I will point out one Boris Johnson is hardly the most anodyne and bland of public speakers either. So I don't think calling for everyone to just calm down a bit is going to do it. And the other thing is that we do live in a more partisan age. We are seeing more people identifying more with their political leadership and their political causes, and in some ways that's a good thing. I was deeply troubled when I was a younger person in politics by the decline in interest in politics and voter apathy. We want people to care and be committed, and saying that people shouldn't be full-throated and really passionate advocates for what they believe in, I just don't think is first of all, it's not going to happen, and second of all, I just don't think is a really positive statement about the future of public life. The British tradition is to have two titanic ideas and crash them together as hard as you can and see what's right about them. That's the point about oppositional politics. That's why our parliament is two swords lengths apart in Westminster. The idea is not going to be oppositional and robust, I'm afraid. It's for the birds.
Let's move to this story, just a final one then, Alex. This crops up from time to time, but this is now something for Andy Burnham's plate, and that is the ballooning welfare bill. And when we hear headlines such as this, and we've had so many headlines around this area, who claims what you can claim for, etc., people who have never worked. Thousands of Brits on benefits for mental health conditions are having payments renewed for years without any kind of checkup. Now, that has to be unacceptable, whether you're Labour, Tory or anyone else for that matter. But will Burnham really tackle this stuff?
Well, I really hope that he does, not least for the people concerned who are trapped in what George W. Bush used to call the soft bigotry of low expectations. You just stay there and we'll pat you nicely on the head, you take your hand out and you'll never need to work again. Yeah. And indeed, the thing that's troubled me about this government the most about the welfare bill is the explosion in the number of people who've been signed off for life since 2024 when they were elected. That is, people who've been told you'll never even have to be checked again. I think that's really bad. When Ian Duncan Smith introduced universal credit, for which many people disliked, the mere fact that they were going to be checked, they hadn't even been checked yet, brought tens of thousands of people back to the workforce. Yeah. Saying that you're going to verify whether someone still needs the help means that they themselves think, do I actually need this, or could I be a bit more productive in society, play a part, get a job and expand my horizons? And it's all to the good for them and for us if they can.
Just a very final story. We'd be remiss if we didn't just reference this, Alex. Of course, the World Cup final last night didn't look much like a cup final in many respects, but Spain won, of course, deservedly so. The Argentinians were pretty poor, both on and off the pitch. And one area of, well, certainly comment, shall we say, and derision has been the half-time entertainment. I don't know how often they've done this sort of kumbaya moment. I thought Coldplay were going to be there, but apparently Chris Martin put it together. Madonna seemed to have done a pre-recorded video and then appeared on the pitch for about 11 seconds. And then there was, various other characters gave it a go as well. And the Muppets were playing the band. I don't know what it was all about, but let's have a listen to Wayne Rooney on how he described it.
I'll be honest, man, was when I finished. I didn't enjoy it. I like a lot of them artists, but I thought it was crap.
Yeah, I think he speaks for all of us, to be honest, Alex.
Well, he certainly spoke for me. I don't know what that dreadful mishmash was meant to be, but it was so bad, it was almost as bad as the BBC's plug for itself immediately afterwards.
Yeah, and Chris Martin appeared in both, which is interesting.
Well, I mean, I don't look to the point that Wayne Rooney was making. There were lots of individual good musicians involved in that appalling performance.
100%.
We just didn't see a single one of them on a good day.
Yeah. Alex, we hit the clock. Great to have you with us. Thank you. Alex Dean, political commentator, with us on the programme. Thank you to him. 0344 499 1000. Will Andy Burnham fix Britain? Peter Cargwell joins us in a few moments. Also, Richard Power Said, a Labour voice, is going to be on too. Lines are open. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This one from Nikki in Bristol says, bless Keir Starmer. The man strides out like a proud dad, leaving the family home, announcing he's left Britain in a much better place. Mate, you must be power walking with your eyes welded shut and earplugs in. The country is basically a burning skip full of ULEZ cameras, tax demands and people wondering why their energy bill could fund a small moon mission. Truly a masterclass in delusion. 10 out of 10 for confidence, 0 for eyesight, says Nikki. Peter Cardwell was watching all of those events unfold live in Downing Street. He's still there for us. Always historic moments, Peter, to be there. Give us your overview of the last few hours.
Well, certainly Keir Starmer wanted to be seen as someone who was a statesman, who'd contributed to the economy, who'd contributed to Ukraine being a better place and the UK being a better place. That's his view of what he did anyway, and lots of people, including Nikki on text there, completely disagree with that. Off he went to a huge cheer, off to the palace, and then about half an hour, 40 minutes later, we had Andy Burnham in Downing Street. Huge crowd, including Dale Vince, the ecotricity millionaire, who's actually standing about 10 yards from me being interviewed. He was there, as were various people like Steve Rotherham, Andy Burnham's family, and many, many supporters. Very interesting what he talked about on policy. He wants to end rough sleeping in this country. As Mayor of Manchester, rough sleeping actually went up in the last 4 years of his time as Mayor of Manchester, so that's something where he hasn't achieved success. It's interesting as well that he's talking about measures as soon as tomorrow to ease the cost of living crisis. We obviously have to find out who the Chancellor is first, and also where that money comes from. So we definitely got a little bit more meat on the bone when it comes to Andy Burnham. He's been heavily criticised, including by me, for not telling us what he wants to do. We got more, we got actual policy proposals there. So that, I suppose, is a good thing, and he will be appointing his cabinet later on this afternoon, and we'll see who are the people who are actually going to implement that.
I mean, that's key, isn't it? This stuff can't go on for days and days. We need, one would have thought, the markets and others need certainly big announcements quickly.
Yeah. Yes, and what's going to happen very, very soon is that Andy Burnham's going to go to the House of Commons and start sacking people. So Ed Miliband apparently has already given a leaving speech to his department. Goodness knows where he'll be off to after that, somewhere else in the cabinet, I would imagine. But people like Peter Kyle, the business secretary, he's almost certain to go, as is Lord Hermer, the Attorney General. So those sackings will take place in person in the House of Commons. Then Andy Burnham will come here and start appointing people. So around 3:30, 4 o'clock, we're expecting the new Chancellor to be announced, probably Shabana Mahmood, and it'll be very interesting to see what she does in her early steps, especially as a very clear plan with quite a number of economic aspects to it has been outlined here already in Downing Street this afternoon.
What's your assessment, Peter, of why Shabana Mahmood would be? I mean, one will always be able to argue, well, anyone but Ed Miliband, which kind of left us with sort of when it appears, we still don't know, that Ed Miliband isn't going to get the Chancellor's job. We were just delighted with any name that cropped up. But what would Mahmood bring to the party? I mean, is she qualified in this area? Is economics a sharp point of her? I know she's a bright woman, but this is very specific, yeah. One would have thought.
It is very specific. The thing I think Shabana Mahmood will have, which is, look, as I've often been told, you know, you've plenty of people at the Treasury who have economic ability. It's really about being tough and saying no to people. It's being a strong character who can say, actually, the money will come from here, we're going to raise taxes, we're going to do what needs to be done. So the minutiae information is important, but not absolutely essential from day one, and she can learn things. It's a real shame, I think, she's going from the Home Office. I don't think she was a perfect Home Secretary, but she certainly did a heck of a lot more than her predecessor, Yvette Cooper. I think a lot of people would like her to remain there. She's also on the right of the Labour Party and can be the kind of big bad wolf character who will say to people, no, we're not doing this, or no, there isn't enough money. And Andy Burnham clearly has shown that he wants to be a people's people pleaser. He wants to be clear with people that he can deliver change. Whereas if you look over to Shabana Mahmood, I think she could become someone who is a bit of a hate figure, which might actually help him diffuse some of the toxicity. That's going to happen very soon. There are 379 Labour MPs who've nominated him to be leader of the Labour Party and Prime Minister. There are not 379 jobs that he can give out. In fact, there's more like 120, 140 over the next 48 hours or so that he and his acolytes will be doling out. So he'll create a lot of enemies already. Then it'll come down to the money, and you need a tough character to deal with that. Shabana Mahmood isn't a natural economist, but we've had a few people who haven't been previously, and they've actually been reasonable chancellors. So we'll see what happens.
So just run that past us again, Peter. Any of the sackings of the existing cabinet ministers will happen in the Prime Minister's parliamentary office. This is the office just behind the Speaker's chair, right?
Yes, that's right. So the Prime Minister, the new Prime Minister Andy Burnham, is still in Downing Street at the moment, but very soon he's going to go across to the Houses of Parliament. He'll go out through the back entrance rather than the front. He'll go into the Prime Minister's office, he'll call people in and sack them, creating the vacancies he needs. Then the first appointment we'll get, I'm pretty sure, will be the Chancellor, and the smart money would be in Shabana Mahmood for that. That will attempt to calm the markets to some degree, especially, as he said, tomorrow there'll be possibly some tax changes. So I think it's very likely that we'll get the reshuffle starting around about 4 o'clock into Drive with Kevin O'Sullivan. I'll be talking to him a bit later on, and into my programme between 7 and 10 as well.
Good work, Peter. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Never dull down there in Downing Street and over on the Westminster patch. He's Peter Cardwell, talk presenter, back tonight on air at 7. But you will hear him with Kevin as well between now and then. But we should get a Chancellor announcement certainly around about the 4 o'clock-ish time. I mean, I quite like one now, to be honest. I need stability. Richard Power Said is with us, former Labour official, a man that brings stability to any conversation. Nice to have you with us, Richard. I mean, look, I'm sure you felt watching it all unfold, you know, isn't this great? But it wasn't like a Labour man taking over a Tory, was it? Or a Reform politician. This was a Labour man taking over the actual Prime Minister, the one that got a landslide.
I mean, one of the things that I really liked about Andy Burnham's speech was him saying what I think we're all thinking, which is like, oh my God, we've had a lot of prime ministers recently. And he's recognising that that's not an ideal situation at all, right? Like, that's not how we want our country to be run. But I think we all will recognise that there's been a series of crises, some of which have been self-imposed, some of which haven't been, that our prime ministers have had to deal with, and it's not very surprising that none of them have quite been able to deal with those crises and those chronic problems. I'm really, you know, I've got my fingers crossed that Andy Burnham, he seems to me to be the one person who recognises how big the problems are and how big and ambitious the response has got to be.
But, of course, laying out, you know, where there are some issues and wouldn't it be great if we could do this, doing all of that is one thing. Everybody's got that list. You know, Boris Johnson, remember, number 10, we will finally solve the scandal of social health care, of social care. I mean, big on that. These big announcements, the sort of broad brush kind of catch-all announcements do happen, but why would we believe Burnham more than we would believe any of the previous prime ministers who promised a lot and not always been able to deliver?
Well, I imagine what Burnham would say is, like, you don't need to believe me now. You need to watch what I'm doing and judge me on that. You know, I don't think he's sitting there demanding that everybody just assume that he's gonna get this right. I mean, one of the things that he said today was, you know, here's my broad brushstrokes announcements about what I'm going to be doing over the next few days, what I'm going to be announcing over the next few days. But I'm going to be giving you, I promise you, I'm going to be talking about how I'm going to pay for it, for instance. So, you know, there's going to be practical detail in that about how he's going to achieve these things, and he's going to be doing that within the fiscal rules. So I would say, actually, this was him, giving us the hopey change stuff. That's what they used to call it in New Labour. The explanations of the ways in which he wants to make things better, whether that's helping young people who aren't in employment get into those jobs, or in training, or in education. ending rough sleeping, like you said, and dealing just fundamentally with the cost of living. We're hoping tomorrow there's going to be something on energy bills, but he's also going to be talking about how that's paid for so that he can make sure that we're on a good trajectory as a country in our debt levels, making sure that we're not spending any more money on that than we have to. I think that's a really sensible, balanced way of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, no new Prime Minister is ever going to show up at Downing Street saying, oh, mate, it's rubbish out there. I haven't got a clue what I'm going to do with all of this. I mean, that would be a bit weird if that happened. So fair play for a bit of optimism. We do need that in a Prime Minister. I thought it was interesting. He mentioned rough sleeping right at the beginning before he went into anything else. This is obviously a project for him. Do we know how well he did in Manchester on this?
My understanding is that he didn't quite hit his target, but it was an extremely ambitious target, and that gave him the space, the political space and the resources to make some really significant improvements. And, I think for lots of people, whether they're in Manchester or anywhere else in the country, rough sleeping is incredibly distressing because it's an expression of like all of the other things that are going wrong in our society, right? Whether that's lack of housing or drug addiction or people's families breaking up, and definitely people not having enough education and training as well. So what I hope is that really bold and ambitious target that he's set himself, even if it's not quite perfectly met, it will really, really help to reduce rough sleeping, yes, but also to deal with all those other problems that Andy Burnham has already told us he cares so much about. And that's why, for instance, he wants to have a massive council house building programme, incredibly bold policy that lots of people kind of hypothetically would want to do, and he's going to put his money where his mouth is. I'm very excited about that.
But there's already a massive house building policy in place.
Well, this would be council house building, so it's something a little bit different. He said he wants to accelerate what's happened already over the last few years, and how exactly he's going to do that, we're going to have to find out.
In terms of the 10-year plan, because that's key, isn't it? Because you can promise a lot of things, but I suppose most of what Mr. Burnham is talking about here fall within the 10-year bracket. These things aren't going to happen in 6 months.
Yeah, so I think the 10-year thing is quite significant, right? Because what it's acknowledging is that a lot of these problems, like you say, you can't solve them immediately, but you've got to bring people along with you. You've got to make them feel like you're helping them now, or you've got to genuinely help them now. That's how you make sure that there's political support, national support for those longer term issues, because people's lives are difficult already. They can't wait 10 years. And so that's why he's going to be doing things like saying tomorrow he's going to be explaining, I think, how bills are going to get brought down. I'm hoping it's going to be energy bills. I'm sure we're all hoping that. And that's telling people how you're going to make your lives better right now. Mm-hmm. And then in the meantime, you've got to do some, frankly, quite boring technical stuff like, within the fiscal rules, increase the amount that you're investing, building lots of big infrastructure projects, which look sexy by the time they're finished, but take an incredibly long time to do. That kind of stuff, that's actually how you ensure that in a decade's time, we've got far more people in employment, and we're feeling optimistic about where our country's going. But yeah, you can't do that stuff very quickly, I'm afraid. There's
the problem, like turning an oil tanker around, as they often say. Richard, thank you for your time. Richard Power Said, former Labour advisor. On the back of that, I think that is the kind of get out, isn't it? That, well, I'm asking for a 10-year plan. So we understand it. You can't do everything in 10 weeks. But simultaneously, when you've come in this kind of coronation fashion, like Andy Burnham has, there's got to be a tangible, real tangible manifestation of this. We can all see it, smell it, touch it. Life's changing. It's changing for the good. That's got to happen. So have a listen to the rough speaking comment that he made, almost the first thing he said, when he took to the microphone at Downing Street around about an hour ago.
We will help people to live well, building a more preventative state, investing in people's success, rather than paying for failure. And that work starts now. I will soon go through that door behind me and issue my first instruction to end rough sleeping in our country.
And that's great. I hope he can end rough sleeping. But saying it, well, in fact, Jeff makes this point. He says, Ian, what Andy says he's going to do and what he's doing are two different things. Words are cheap. And we've heard all of this before. Blah, blah. We have a bit. We need to see the results. We need to see them quicker than he hasn't got the wiggle room you'd give to a new Prime Minister after a general election. Thoughts on that? This is Talk.
I spoke to the Chief Constable of Devon and Cornwall Police 3 times. I spoke to the Prime Minister as well, and those calls took place over Friday and Saturday, and they both told me it's a burglary that's gone wrong. I said, no, it is not. A burglar does not park his car on your drive and walk into the house. And I went to Dartmoor on Saturday and I said, I have no doubt this is a premeditated murder. I received tons of abuse for saying it, but sadly, it's proved that I'm right.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
What do they mean by a circuit breaker? What do they mean by a circuit breaker? What is that? It was used during COVID, wasn't it? Put a circuit breaker in and that'll stop people catching it. This is what Andy Burnham said when he used the phrase circuit breaker.
We will make this moment a circuit breaker for Britain, bringing forward the biggest changes in the last 40 years. A new political model and a new economic model. In the 1980s, Britain took some wrong turns. Political power was centralised, economic power privatised, large parts of the country deindustrialised, and they still haven't recovered. Many feel as though they're still in decline, and they don't have the ability to turn things around, and that's why we will change politics.
That's why we will change politics. Andrew in Hertfordshire, are you buying into all of this? Are you feeling excited?
So, first and foremost, we did say this was going to happen. Starmer's gone, he's in. And in the first speech, you see that he is a compulsive liar. If you go to the statistics, you can see that rough sleeping in Manchester has increased by 40%, and he was the mayor. And it's a nothing statement. It's to take the headlines away from the things that people care about. People don't want a house of multiple occupancy next door to their home or on the way to their children's school. That's the problem in the country. And what we've got now is the only politician that told the truth today was Boris Johnson. The Mandarins conspired to make sure that the immigration numbers went up. He actually...
Well, I'm not sure he quite said that.
No, but okay, it's sort of reading between the lines.
But he was the Prime Minister, though.
Yeah, he was the Prime Minister. He set in place a policy, but Burnham has to confront the civil service. And all that's going to happen in the country is we're going to lurch further and further left now as this communist tries to wreck the country.
So you think Andy Burnham is a communist?
Oh, God, yeah. What, privatising?
I mean, I'm not suggesting you're not allowed to think that, by the way. It's a perfectly legit form of politics. But a communist, I mean, he's like way ahead of Jeremy Corbyn in terms of his left-wingism.
Yeah, and think about it. Look what he's done. He's divided the country. Divide and conquer. It's the South against the North. That's what he's done. He is a divisive, communist, us against them type politician, and he's making us turn on ourselves, and he wants us to eat each other. Not actually physically, but he wants us to start hating each other. Because
why would he want that to be the case?
Well, then why does he talk about the North and the South and not Britain?
Because he believes that there is an imbalance in how the regions have benefited or not benefited, depending on where you are geographically.
Yes, and why is that? What's the root cause of it? It's beaching and shutting down all the train lines. That's what wrecked.
Well, that goes back a fair while, right?
Yeah, and who was in charge of the country then and putting things into private ownership? It was the Labour Party.
When was Dr. Beeching doing his closing down?
Just after the war, they go in and they nationalise the railways. Have you heard of that?
Well, I've heard of nationalisation of railways, yeah.
Yeah, so he goes in and he takes all the branch lines out. So if you ever look at a map and you see the way the country was interconnected at that time,
yes,
it was brilliant. And what they did was they killed it, and then they invented the Road Hauliers Association, and then we were stuck with the car. And that meant that if you lived in a rural or a coastal area, say, you could say somewhere like North Norfolk or Suffolk, you could get, without a car, to London. They shut all that down, and those communities became unique in that they had no connectivity unless you had a car.
I mean, I'm sure not everywhere was connected, of course, but I take your point that your assessment is that it was much better then. How does that feed into Andy Burnham now, though?
Because Andy Burnham is taking those areas that Labour created and setting them against the south of the country, and also Cornwall and everywhere else. He's a divisive person. He is actually really nasty because he wants me to hate people in the north and people in the north to hate people in the south because of
Do you
money.
really think he wants that? I've never heard anyone say that, even his greatest critics.
No, you haven't, because his greatest critics haven't sat back and thought to themselves, what is the root thing driving him? If he divides us, he can conquer us and we can become dependent on the state, and that's what he wants. So if he divides us, he conquers us, and we're dependent on him for money.
On that point, it's a more of a pessimistic but very honest assessment from Andrew in Hertfordshire. He's a communist who wants us to eat each other politically, hate each other, the North, the South. I have not seen that in Andy, but I think a lot of what he's saying about the North and South, by the way, is tripe. I think it's dramatic, it's over-egged, it's not real, all of that. And, of course, the country isn't just the North and the South, there's the Southwest. Southwest is further from London than Manchester, for example. Tarquin, down in London, Tarquin, what have you got for us? Hi.
Ian, I'm the king of the North, and I'm a circuit breaker for all the BS that these uniform blah, 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 blah. Vomit, insert vomit sound. It's just honestly, Ian,
yes,
this guy this guy, Andy Burnham, he's a member, fully signed-up member of the Fabian Society. So is all of the rest of the cabinet.
Well, that's just a red herring. The Fabian Society thing is it's like being in equity if you're an actor.
No. That's what they'd like. It's the wolf in sheep's clothing analogy. Look at their old logo. It's the fact that they've done it surreptitiously over the last 100 years.
Well, but they don't. You got it the wrong way round, Tarquin. You got it the wrong way round. So it's not like the Fabian Society is this sort of secret cartel of people that are sitting there. The people are the people that are the members of it. It's like the Labour Party.
Well, if you've got your view on what it is, it's pointless me trying to explain to the
Well, I'm just saying I don't think it's not like the accusations of the WEF.
It's the thing is, though, the Hydra has many heads, Ian. The point is about this. He is still a member of the Fabians. They are a neo-communist, as your last caller said, society. That is their aim. And until he disavows that and we prescribe it as a terrorist organisation, Britain isn't going anywhere other than where your last caller just said. That's the truth.
Well, we will see, Tarquin. Listen, on that point, believe me, I love the drama around all of this. Thank you, Tarquin, with another not particularly thumbs-up moment for Andy Burnham. Right, you want to win some... Is this cash time? You want to win some money? Here it is.
Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to win a massive £26,000.
The question is, what would you do with all that money?
I don't know. We've got a wedding.
I would buy a camper van.
Probably just like clothes, yeah.
Go on a big holiday.
Emigrate.
So if you fancy getting your hands on £26,000 tax-free, here's all the details you need to enter.
For your chance to win, visit talk.tv/win or text TALK to 8338 by 6 p.m. on the 20th of July 2026. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or send your name and number by post to Comp1 PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. To arrive by midnight on the 23rd of July 2026. 18 plus, UK residents only. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 8338 now. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, welcome back. It is the home of common sense. So, the big news today, we have a different Prime Minister. Andy Burnham has vowed to be a circuit breaker. A circuit breaker? What's one of those? For Britain, in his first speech as Prime Minister, promising the biggest changes in 40 years and pledging to drag power out of Westminster and into every postcode in the land. We're all going to benefit, not just those demons down there in Westminster, which, of course, is the way that Mr Burnham, I think, has kind of been selling this over the last few weeks. Of course, Keir Starmer, therefore, had to make his final speech as Prime Minister to declare his work was done. Seriously, he insists, and he's insisting on it again, that he's left Britain in a better state than how he found it. I'm not quite sure how he gets away with that, but that's his assessment. And Boris Johnson, elsewhere, has blamed Remainer civil servants for the so-called Boris wave of mass migration, claiming Whitehall officials feared Brexit would turn Britain into a leper colony and deliberately open the doors to European workers, whilst admitting his own government failed to shut it fast enough once the scale became clear. Well, ultimately, it does fall to him, of course. He is, or was back then, the Prime Minister. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news, 0344 499 1000, all of these stories, and of course the big story of the day, will Andy Burnham fix Britain? Is Big Andy, or our Andy, is he the man to do it? Very positive stuff going on. He's recalibrating, he's circuit breaking all over the place. He couldn't have wheeled out any more platitudes if he tried. Was it all mean? Are you at any level confident he will achieve some of it? And some of this stuff needs to happen quicker than 10 years. I think he's got 6 months to make a tangible difference. Let's speak with Lord Matthew Elliott, Tory peer. Good afternoon to you, Matthew. Always good to gauge your views on this thing. You know, of course, no Prime Minister is ever going to show up on the steps of Number 10 and say, do you know what, it's hopeless. I've got no idea what I'm doing. I haven't even got a clue as to where I should start. So sorry about that. Wish me luck. It's always going to be threaded with positivity, and I think Mr Burnham certainly did that. But do you believe him?
Well, I think it has to be said that optically he did a good job in his arrival. I thought it did actually look quite fresh, and it always looked like a Prime Minister entering after a general election. So he got the communications right. But of course, there's a lot more to governing than having good communications. We need to have good policy as well. And if he wants, growth in every postcode, we really need a different change of economic policy. And I haven't really seen that yet from what he said. In fact, it seems to be going back to the 1970s, which, of course, was a time when Britain was really the sort of sick man of Europe and not having very good growth. So that would be the wrong strategy of Britain.
Indeed. I mean, he's got his work cut out here because, I mean, although he's not gone specific, I think there's enough in there, Matthew, to be able to see that this is a man that is claiming not just to do better than Keir Starmer, but he's talking about the deconstruction of our entire system, economically, politically or otherwise, whether it was the Tories or Labour in power. I mean, this is massive. Forgetting, by the way, that he was an intrinsic part of the previous Labour administration.
Very true. He wants to sort of rewind by 40 years, he was saying. So not really acknowledging what happened under Blair and Brown. And what's interesting, actually, if you look back to the 1970s, actually the level of taxation and the level of spending was actually lower than it is today. So the idea that we're living in some sort of neoliberal or sort of free market paradise now simply isn't the case. The size of the government is much bigger than what it should be to make sure we get the right levels of growth in the UK, the right living standards. So if we want to do something about that, it needs to be thinking about how we can slim down government, get Britain fitter, get some more trade going, really help empower businesses and SMEs across the country. That's how to get growth going and help everybody's prosperity.
Indeed. And, of course, as I said at the beginning, Matthew, this has got to happen. Look, no one's expecting everything to happen, and we know that changing policy significantly, whichever party you're in, is like turning an oil tanker around. But he's got to show some results in about 6 months, hasn't he?
He does, very much so. Otherwise, I think by this time next year, he'll be in a similar position to Keir Starmer and his approval rating. And he really has the summer. He said he's going to have this 10-year plan he wants to unveil, presumably but at a Labour Party conference at the end of September. Then, of course, there's the big moment of the budget, presumably in October or November. And that will be the real test for the government. First of all, who's he going to select as Chancellor later this afternoon? But then what will their budget be? You know, will they bring in, for example, higher taxes on businesses and higher wealth taxes? And will they put even more pressure on SMEs and small business owners and job creators? And if that happens, we certainly won't be getting the growth and the prosperity and the jobs that Britain so desperately needs.
Do you think he can... I mean, they've talked about everything is complicit with the manifesto and the like. And, you know, we already know that they have buckled in one aspect, no taxation on working people, forgetting that employer national insurance is on working people. So there's that. What's your instinct tell you he's likely to do with that? Because he's not got... He can't just put up income tax, right?
He can't do that, no. And there was talk, of course, during this sort of the quasi-legislative election when Wes Streeting was thinking about standing, of increasing capital gains tax so it aligned with income tax. Now, of course, if you did that, you put off a whole lot of investment into the UK and from domestic investors as well. And that would actually undermine the economy in a big way. So I really hope they don't do that. And another key point, he was talking about youth unemployment and the importance of tackling that. And that's something I care deeply about as well. But it's all very well getting the education side of things right, and that's really important to do. But you also need the business side of things right. If you're increasing employers' NI, if you're increasing the minimum wage, if you're bringing in the Employment Rights Act, all these different things actually put off employers from hiring more young people. So you need the education system right and the business side of things as well.
In terms of this cabinet of talent that he's got to produce, much of it, the big roles, I suppose, in the next few hours, one would have thought. What are your what's your gut telling you, Matthew, on this? What do you think we're going to be seeing in hours from now?
Well, it'd be fascinating to see what he does with Ed Miliband and or whether he leaves the government. Of course, he has his eyes set on being the Chancellor, which I don't think will be good for the UK from what his instincts are in terms of increasing taxation and spending. But will he be kept at the energy department? So, of course, the high energy costs in the UK are another key point holding back the economy. And it seems quite clear from what Andy Burnham has already said that he perhaps wants to get oil and gas going again in the North Sea. That would be a good thing. It seems crazy that we're sort of importing oil and gas into the UK. We have our own homegrown resources. So that would be a good first move. So there are some good nuggets amongst all of this. But like you were saying, he needs the right ministers in the right places to actually deliver on those things. And having something like Ed Miliband at the heart of it, I think would be a bad move for the government.
Apparently, Shabana Mahmood is odds on for the big job.
That would be an interesting choice. So she seems to have delivered quite effectively at the Home Office in terms of policy implementation. So that could be a good move, but she has very little track record when it comes to economics. So it's unclear what her economic policy would be. Does that mean it will be driven sort of directly from number 10? Or would it actually be number 11 doing it? That'd be a key point to work out. But we can't have another Chancellor just simply drifting along with the Treasury orthodoxy, which has partly got us into this mess over the past few years. And that orthodoxy almost assumes that if you increase taxes, you get more revenue in rather than actually destroying the economy. So we need to see a movement away from that towards more pro-growth, pro-wealth creation, more job creation policies.
Could he be one of those politicians that luck in the sense that, you know, many people say that, you know, as Mayor of Manchester, he was quite a good communicator. He was good at the PR. He was great at pressing the flesh and turning up to the opening of the museum and stuff like that. But actually, a lot of the big stuff in Manchester was sort of well underway before he ever came along. And then, of course, you pitch up and you take the glory to a certain extent. And all politicians do it. I mean, they must be aware that there's people behind the scenes shouting at their TVs when Andy Burnham's saying, I changed people's lives in Manchester. Could the same thing happen here? You know, we've been through a lot of bad stuff economically, defence issues and goodness knows what. Could suddenly the country turns around kind of anyway and Mr Burnham finds himself the chief recipient?
I think you put your finger on it. As mayor, it is quite easy to come along and take credit for things that have already been put in place. In government, of course, you've got to make decisions. So that means saying no to people as well as saying yes to people. So, for example, if he has to make a choice between does he increase welfare or does he put more money towards defence and try and meet our commitments there, these are clear choices that prime ministers have to make, and you can't duck them. You can't dodge them. You can't get away with some decent comms to escape them. You actually need to make those clear decisions. So we haven't yet really seen, is he a good decision maker? Is he happy to say no to people as well as say yes? And that's unclear at the moment.
And while you're with us, Matthew, just one other story here involving Boris Johnson. Let's have a listen to this clip.
I'm a generous-minded sort of guy. I'm not going to discriminate against people because of where they come from. What I do think they need to do is be British. I think that over decades, we've been far too limp-wristed in insisting that people conform to our ideals and norms of our society. Give me an example.
So there's a couple of points here, Matthew. One is that he's accusing Andy Burnham of plotting a sort of gradual reversal on Brexit. This is real terra firma for you, of course. And also claiming Labour would seek easier European travel for students, which, of course, is an initiative for the, I think it's the under-30s, that has been mooted around under various prime ministers. I think Rishi Sunak was broadly in favour of that idea. What are your thoughts on those 2 points?
Well, we're seeing this in real time as part of the government's EU reset, as part of dynamic alignment. And there's talk of allowing greater sort of youth mobility, both through a specific scheme and also the Erasmus Plus scheme. There's also talk from the EU that they won't actually allow any new deal with the UK unless we give EU students the same level of fees as domestic students. Now, this would cost UK universities about £100 million a year, so a huge cost to UK universities, so it would seem very unfair for that to happen. So again, that's another example of a clear decision. As PM, will he be willing to buckle under pressure from the EU and allow that to happen, or will he stand up for UK students and UK universities?
I guess, you know, his answer, as they all tend to answer, is there's nothing wrong with greater and beneficial cooperative arrangements that we have with Europe. I mean, they are our nearest ally, and we are in the continent, if not the Union.
Yes, he would say that. What I'm concerned about when it comes to the current EU deals that we're currently in the process of negotiating, that started off with Keir Starmer, we seem to be paying over the odds for what we're getting back. So just one example, the Erasmus Plus scheme that we've signed up to, we're paying much more per person, per pupil, than we were when we were inside the EU by about double the amount. Right. So that seems to be extremely poor value for money. And when you start adding all of these up, the costs of being a member of the, sort of quasi-member of the EU through these schemes start to mount up very steeply.
Indeed, and on that point, we thank you, Matthew. Great to see you again. Good to have you on with us. Lord Matthew Elliott, Tory peer, on a variety of issues there surrounding Andy Burnham. Can he make it happen? I think the last point as well about Boris Johnson is rather interesting. I know we've only seen Burnham make a speech outside of Downing Street, but today, in what has become, I suppose, you know, a semi-regular moment every couple of years, we've changed Prime Minister again. This time, Andy Burnham has the gig. It's particularly acute with Burnham because, of course, he wasn't an MP. What, 4 weeks ago? Something of that order. He was a mayor of Greater Manchester, did very well. Apparently people liked him. And now he's our Prime Minister. I mean, that's a big shift, all right? They are two very different gigs. What is your assessment of the whole thing, basically, but certainly on what you heard him say outside the steps of Downing Street? Thoughts on that as well, 0344 499 1000.
I spoke to the Chief Constable of Devon and Cornwall Police 3 times. I spoke to the Prime Minister as well, and those calls took place over Friday and Saturday, and they both told me it's a burglary that's gone wrong. I said, no, it is not. A burglar does not park his car on your drive and walk into the house. And I went to Dartmoor on Saturday and I said, I have no doubt this is a premeditated murder. I received tons of abuse for saying it, but sadly, it's proved that I'm right.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This one from Claire, who's near the Cotswolds. She says, Ian, can you please explain to me why everyone is talking about 10 years of Labour? If my math is correct, Labour has had 2 years in power already, which means 3 years left to run. Yeah, maximum. Before an election. If anyone is serious and is being serious and you factor in another 5 years after a vote, then that equals 8 years. That leads me to the big question. Are Labour trying to fiddle the books and start Burnham's tenure from now for 5 years and hoping they get another 5 years after? I think they are. I think the idea... I mean, I suppose it sounds rubbish if you're the new Prime Minister and you say, I've got a 7-year plan or a 6.5-year plan. So if you say it's 10 years... then you work it out for yourself afterwards. That would mean Labour win the 2029 election and the one after that and the one after that, right? Of which Burnham would have to be at least a couple of years of that to make the maths work. On that point of homelessness, which he mentioned, of course, in his speech, it was a big moment, very early doors as he stood outside Downing Street. He talked about ending rough sleeping. Have a listen.
We will help people to live well, building a more preventative state, investing in people's success rather than paying for failure. And that work starts now. I will soon go through that door behind me and issue my first instruction to end rough sleeping in our country.
To end rough sleeping in our country. Mick is in Bromley on this one. Mick, what have you got for us? Hi.
Hi, Ian. This is the usual Labour Party absolute garbage he's coming out with again about the homelessness. You think in London, half the homeless in London all over the place are foreign asylum seekers. The other half are English people who can't get houses because they're full of foreign asylum seekers.
Because the other half of the foreign asylum seekers have got the houses or the hotels.
Yeah, exactly. And all the new ones that are being built are being given to asylum seekers.
Yeah.
So it's just complete, absolute BS. It's rubbish just to deflect what else he's going to do.
Is it good for a politician to at least aspire to it? Because he made a big thing about it, didn't he?
Yeah, no, if he said to us, look, we've got no chance of doing it, we can't build all these houses, people would understand. They go, right, we know we can't build them because you've got all these people here. You've got too many people for the amount of houses you need. I mean, what can you argue? If he's telling the truth, you've just got to put up with it. It's as simple as that. It's just got absolutely ridiculous now. The things they come out with, everything in this country boils down to immigration now. Absolutely everything. There's nothing that it doesn't touch. And that's the main thing that needs to...
But the problem is, if you're on the left, Mick, and Andy Burnham is obviously on the left. I mean, Andrew earlier said he was a communist. I mean, maybe he is. I wouldn't call him a communist, and I'm not saying that even a communist is necessarily a pejorative, but he's just definitely a left-winger. This argument that we have, this discussion you and I are having now, Mick, about the problem with immigration, those people on that side of the political spectrum don't even recognise it.
No, they refuse to believe it. They just sort of...
I mean, I don't even think they refuse. I genuinely believe that they think it's not a problem.
I don't even believe that. I think they do think it's a problem, but they don't want to acknowledge it. They don't care what anyone else thinks. They know it's a problem, but we're going to do something else anyway.
Yeah, that's true. But, of course, they see people coming over on boats. And, of course, it's not just boats. Boats is actually a smallish part of the bigger equation, as you know. But they see people on boats as, a crisis. I mean, like some kind of sort of Bob Geldof thing.
It's like giving your kids your credit card. They'll just spend and spend and spend, and then someone else is going to have to pay for it. And that's exactly what they're doing. And it's just like, we're never, ever going to end the problems in this country until someone stands up and admits we've got an immigration problem and everything is stopped. Not one person is allowed in the country until we sort out what we got.
You see, I don't understand why that would even be controversial, what you've just said, Mick. To me, that just sounds like whether you're left-wing or right-wing, that's a sensible thing to do, isn't it? You can't keep increasing your population by 100,000 a year. That's just the channel crossings. And for there to be no tangible knock-on challenging effect to that. I'm putting that nicely.
Exactly. Look at Poland. They're living in a paradise because they're not letting one single one in. They've got no problem at all. You can walk around the streets at 12 o'clock at night and not worried about getting mugged or knifed or all the rest of it. They don't have these problems because they don't let them in. You've just got to stop it. You've got to say, no more. Europe's got to get together and go, this is it. We have to draw the drawbridge up and say no more until problems are sorted.
Is Poland not taking anyone? I mean, because they were, of course.
No, I mean, they're taking the Ukrainians and that, but they're not taking these people who are coming from Somalia and all the rest of it, where all the trouble comes from. These people are not...
But my point of this, I mean, most of those people that come over on a boat aren't going to cause you any trouble at all. That doesn't mean to say...
I don't believe that. I don't believe
it'd be a bit weird, wouldn't it, if you suddenly had... I mean, I was thinking about this earlier. We used to talk about this. We've been talking about this since 2016, Mick. No one ever mentioned the trouble bit until the last couple of years.
Yeah. I can tell you a story. I remember when I was about, 12 years old, and I was down in Hastings with my dad, who was a physics lecturer. And I saw all these little shops and they had signs for these unknown college courses and all the rest of it. And I remember saying to my dad, what are all they about? And he said, oh, that's so people can get in and get passports easily.
Wow, yeah.
And I'm 60 now, so that's how long ago I remember it, 50-odd years ago.
I mean, these things have been brewing, of course, and you're absolutely right. Education was a classic way that's facilitated a lot of really questionable immigration. I mean, just to clarify my point, Mick, whilst I don't think everyone in a boat is a rapist, the fact is we don't know who is, right?
No, this is exactly the
point. We're being asked to play Russian roulette with the lives of people in this country because the government, this one and the last one, cannot solve the problem of tens of thousands of mostly men, almost all men, floating across the channel on a rubber boat. It's unbelievable. Mick, thank you very much indeed for that. Simon in Devon says, remember when rough sleeping was eradicated overnight during COVID? It kind of was, wasn't it? Do the same. Take over the hotels. Provide wraparound services with them. Paul says, stop rough sleeping will cost Burnham nothing because he'll just get local councils to come up with the plans and pay for it. That's a fair point. Nick says this. Nick's in who? Burnham didn't say circuit breaker, Ian. He said sausage maker in a homage to Starmer. You might be right. Dan in Bristol. It is the start of something. I'm calling Burnham bull. Anything from Labour, drones is absolute nonsense, says Dan. Not buying into the Andy Burnham, I can rebuild your country with a lot of enthusiasm. One from Rick. Personally, I don't want Andy Burnham in 10 days, let alone 10 years. All it has changed is the face. Same awful Labour. Well, he says, doesn't he? Burnham says, no, I can get this thing properly sorted. This is going to be a whole different experience. And one here from Chris and the regional team in South Manchester says, when Burnham came to power as mayor in Manchester, one of the first things he mentioned was the amount of rough sleepers in Manchester. He cited arriving in Manchester Piccadilly as a tourist and walking down to Piccadilly Gardens, the amount of rough sleepers. Shock horror. It's as bad now as it was then, and he's done nothing. He now wants to do this on a national scale. Tangible evidence of his failure before he's even started. That's Chris, who is part of a team in South Manchester, so knows the territory, knows the story well, and no reason to believe exactly what Chris has just told us is not true. Thank you for that. That is it for me. Samara Gill's going to take over because I'm feeling as rough as old boots. I'm allowed to say that, aren't I? Can I say that? Because otherwise, you know, people might think I've been kidnapped or gone to work for Andy Burnham in a moment of madness, or maybe gone to work for Zach Polanski in a moment of greater madness. No, rough as old boots is the only phrase that gets near how I'm feeling. Samara is here. She's brilliant. She's after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Well, poor Ian, he's gone off. He's not feeling very well, so you're stuck with me for the next hour and a half. Yes, it's me, Samara Gill. And my goodness, what a news day. I don't blame Ian for being a bit overwhelmed and just running out of the studio. No, I'm joking. Poor guy's actually quite unwell. But there's a lot to get into, and we will bring you all the latest updates here on Talk. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Do give me a call. Let me know. The question of the day that Ian's put to you, and that I will absolutely put to you as well, is will Andy Burnham fix Britain? I think that's the question on every single person in this country's minds today. Is this going to be the man to lead us into the future? He, in his speech this morning, he called it a circuit breaker. He is leading on this John Lennon-esque sort of hope in every postcode, growth in every postcode, hope in every heart sentiment. See, I can't even get it right. It's way too long of a tagline. I just don't understand it. You know, he's bopping away to the New World Order. I think he thinks that being Prime Minister is like showing up to an Oasis concert and just letting everyone do the rest. And I think that he's going to get a very, very rude awakening to that. But do let me know what you think. Give me a call, give me a text, and we will discuss it all here on Talk. Well, one thing that I was pretty happy about as I was scrolling on Twitter last night is to see the announcement that digital ID is actually going to be scrapped under the Labour government and under a Burnham government. Now, can we call this maybe Burnham's first U-turn? Or is anything that he does scrap, is that going to be a U-turn that we then say wasn't his original plan? I don't know. But it's interesting, you know, if digital ID was so essential, as the Labour government was telling us for so long, then why has it been scrapped all of a sudden? Is this some sort of admission of guilt? Is it them saying that actually they never needed it in the first place? I mean, you remember the lie they tried to tell us. They tried to say, oh, it's so that we can control immigration. But then everyone needs it, and it's got access to your healthcare, your taxes, a lot of information that, honestly, you might not want a Labour government like that having. Well, let's talk to Jamie Jenkins. He's a former ONS statistician, and he knows a lot about this. Jamie, welcome to the show.
Hey, good afternoon. You all good?
I'm good. I'm just wondering if we should trust this killing of public policy. I mean, was this doomed from the start, Jamie?
Yeah, well, when they first got announced, they were talking about this was going to stop the boats, wasn't it? And illegal immigration would be stopped by having digital ID. But I think within 24 hours, that started falling apart because we could see that many countries across Europe that have digital ID, they're struggling with illegal immigration as well. And the thought that having some digital kind of ID that you need to prove that you need to work is going to stop people coming and working in the black market was for the birds, I think. So I think what Burnham's done here is what we haven't heard him formally come out and say anything yet. Obviously, these are media reports, and Starmer had rode back a little bit previously to say that it wouldn't be mandatory, this digital ID, but they never budgeted for this. It was never in their manifesto. And maybe Burnham's just reading the room that there was that petition saying basically there was 3 million people opposing this. So he's probably reading the room and thinking, right, what things can I kick out that wasn't in the manifesto, that was unpopular under Keir Starmer, get rid of them early on so we can have a bit of a reset. That's probably what he's doing at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's no illusion that this was a woefully unpopular plan. It almost galvanised both the left and right together with how much they hated, you know, mother government coming in and wanting all their information and almost trying to tag every citizen so that the government could watch over them. That's kind of what it felt like. And Jamie, you're completely right to mention budget, because the OBR previously costed the programme at £1.8 billion over 3 years that it was going to cost us. The government said it would be funded from existing departmental budgets, but they didn't identify those savings. So that kind of means that the scheme wasn't just controversial, but it was extremely expensive. The question is here, you know, it went from compulsory to then voluntary to then cancelled. So what's actually going to happen to that money? It's not really like we're going to get it back, but they shouldn't have ever put taxpayers' money at risk in the first place.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things the Labour government have been doing. They've been just spending it's like there's plenty of money awash all the single time. But I think ultimately what you've got here is that we're still going to have some forms of ID in the system overall. You've got this one login, which is mandatory kind of digital system for directors, for company houses. There's talk of obviously digital licenses. So whilst he's saying he's scrapping the concept of digital ID, where you might have to prove that who you are so you can do certain things in society, we are going to continue to see that creep into more digitalised in the system. But the key concerns for me, which is why I was against digital ID from the start, is you obviously having the government with all one system and the potential for data leaks and people hacking into the system. And ultimately, it's freedom of choice. You shouldn't have to prove who you are using some digital record. So that's why it's a good thing that they've rode back on it, I think. But you still got that overhanging that social media ban, though. So if there's going to be a social media ban for younger people, are adults going to need to prove digitally who they are so that they can access the services that the youngsters can't? So there's still some confusion and some ambiguity in terms of what the public will need to do going forward for these other policies to be in place as well.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Jamie. And look, when you look at the things that he's sort of scrapping, the policies that he's putting in place, wanting to nationalise steel, which is actually a Reform Party policy, are these things that he's trying to do to appease the right wing of the country? Because in some ways, when I hear him talk, he's always kind of appeasing his party, which are, to be honest, a bunch of sort of lefty lunatics, especially the backbenchers. But it seems like he's actually sort of trying to play both sides. He's known as a political people pleaser. Is this just another people-pleasing move, or do you think he really does stand by it and doesn't want that sort of control?
Well, we've had the Starmer experiment, which is the Labour kind of metropolitan London type politician. And just, you know, if you go back to May, I live in Wales, and we saw the collapse of Welsh Labour, losing the Welsh Parliament and losing an election for the first time in 100 years. So he's got that tag of being somebody from the north. And where Reform have been tapping into is that kind of people in the north going over to Reform, people in Wales. So he's probably looking back to those, as he said in his speech today, those industrial heartlands. But this is where I think one of the big challenges of his premiership is going to be immediately there, because we've obviously got these net zero policies that Ed Miliband's been going for. And if you want to talk about kind of getting more industry back into the UK, well, ultimately, you look at our industrial energy prices, they're 4 times what they are in the USA. They're one of the highest, if not the highest, in Europe. So if you want to start creating things in this country, which I would support, it's good for jobs, it creates wealth, it stops money that we generate within this country going abroad on more imports. He's going to need an energy policy. I think Donald Trump's talking about him drilling in the North Sea again, which would be welcome if we can get our energy prices down. That remains to be seen at the moment. But he's going to have that big thing in terms of how do we appeal to the voters potentially who've gone to the Green Party who might not support that. So he's got to win basically the Green vote and the Reform vote back to the Labour Party if he's going to have any chance in the next general election.
I fear for him, honestly. It's the classic trying to please everybody and in the end pleasing absolutely nobody, which in a way Keir Starmer with his indecisiveness did have that problem and ultimately fell on the sword of not being able to decide what he's going to do. He was almost paralysed by it. And I think you're right. He is going to have to pick up a coalition of Greens and Reform voters with his policies, because they are absolutely biting at the heels of Labour at the moment. So it's going to be a very, very tight rope to walk. Let's talk about foreign aid, something that we don't really know about in terms of Andy's position, in my opinion. You know, the right-wing philosophy right now is very much that we need to talk about Britain first. We've got issues back home. We're in a time of great austerity, not prosperity. Why are we giving billions and billions of pounds in foreign aid? I mean, just last year, the UK spent about 13 billion on official development assistance. What can you tell me about his stance on foreign aid or what you predict it might be?
Yeah, well, some of the Labour backbenchers are already talking and pushing for Andy Burnham to bring it back up to what was used to be 0.7% of our kind of gross national income. So that would mean that we're spending more than we currently have because there's been some cuts to the budget. Some of the budget is also used for the asylum system with all the people coming over on boats. So some of the money's been spent there. But I think you've got to lay bare tomorrow what's really going on with the public finances here. So since Labour have come in, they've borrowed £274 billion. Now, if we just take May alone, the latest figures, we get some new ones from the ONS out tomorrow. But in May, we borrowed £23.3 billion just in May, and 11.7% debt interest. So when you look at those figures that we're borrowing across the country, can we afford to continue to just give money abroad? So the 13 billion you just talked about that we spent in 2025, if they go back to this 0.7% figure that was in previous years, that's another £8 billion on top. And it's a bit like, you know, if you're running a household and you can't afford to pay all your bills and you're paying, you know, borrowing on the credit card, will you though go and pay next door's bills as well? Would you go and give them money next door? That's ultimately the choices we've got to decide as a country. We're borrowing money to stand still, but we're giving money to the rest of the world. And I think if he starts trying to creep that foreign aid budget back up, that's really going to not be pleasant in terms of trying to get some of those reform voters back. But there are people on the left who would like them to increase and probably spend even more. So back to the earlier point there, how does he keep both sets of type of voters to get them back? That's the challenge he's going to have.
No, it's absolutely mental, Jamie, honestly, when you think about the amount of money we've been pouring into foreign aid while our defence budgets are being cut, while we're spending billions on housing asylum seekers, and those boats aren't stopping from those so-called war-torn countries. You do start to think, OK, what's going on here? And in the most recent case with Shabir Ahmed, who is the Rochdale grooming gang's leader, the way that Pakistan, a country that we have given several billions of our taxpayer dollars to, is blatantly refusing to take him back and disrespecting the British people and the British government in that process. I mean, what do you make of that? Is this something we will see more and more and more, the way that governments overseas can take and take and take, but when push comes to shove, they don't want to do their part of the deal and take, I don't know, criminals back, or, you know, make sure that visas are, if we say that we're going to ban visas coming in from their countries, they're actually going to try and clamp down, because we also know that there was an airport scandal as well to do with the Pakistani government trying to lobby for another airport around the Manchester region. So it's all quite dark and insidious. You know, foreign aid sounds like a very flowery thing. Oh, giving money to poorer countries so that they'll be okay and so that they don't cause issues and create an influx of refugees onto our country. But it ends up kind of getting crossed into all types of situations, and to be honest, it can fuel corruption, can't it?
Yeah, and where a lot of this aid goes, how do you audit it? It's actually delivering what it's supposed to be doing on the ground. Some of the money goes to organisations, gets pooled with other countries' money, so it's very difficult to kind of ascertain what's going on. And on Pakistan, I think the interesting thing there, obviously some money is channeled into Pakistan. We know that happened in the past quite a bit. Is that Pakistan is one of those countries which is quite surprisingly, it does top, but when you look at the old asylum system in the UK, the number one source of people claiming asylum is from Pakistan. Now, they're not very few of them are coming over on these boats. They're all coming legally, and then they're deciding to change and look for asylum before their visas run out, because they either come on study or work visas. And we know many, many hundreds of thousands go back and forth Pakistan, back and forth on holiday, visit family every single year. So to say it's not a safe country as well for the asylum system, just absolutely bonkers. And the government needs to get tough. Yeah, if you want to work with us, if you want to have visas, and if you want people to come back and forth for family and for holidays, then you could have to take these criminals back. Why should the taxpayer basically be paying for somebody whilst they're in prison, and now he's out, they can't deport him? It's absolute madness. So it'll be interesting to see who arrives now in the cabinet for Andy Burnham. We expect a new chancellor in particular, so we may go down a slightly different economic model to Rachel Reeves, but that's going to be coming out in the next 24 hours. I think that's the big thing now, is who's in the cabinet and who's not, because if people like David Lammy, for example, don't get in, will there be a bit of a revolt and people already plotting with the knives against Andy Burnham? Because in politics and in party politics, you can't please everybody all of the time.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Andy can please his way out of this one. Jamie Jenkins, thank you so much for joining us. That's Jamie Jenkins, he's a statistician and he knows exactly what he's talking about. So that's very interesting. It's an interesting look into what a potential Burnham government could bring. Will Andy Burnham fix Britain? That is the question. Do give me a call on 0344 499 1000 and I will see you after the break.
I spoke to the Chief Constable of Devon and Cornwall Police 3 times. I spoke to the Prime Minister as well, and those calls took place over Friday and Saturday, and they both told me it's a burglary that's gone wrong. I said, no, it is not. A burglar does not park his car on your drive and walk into the house. And I went to Dartmoor on Saturday and I said, I have no doubt this is a premeditated murder. I received tons of abuse for saying it, but sadly, it's proved that I'm right.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. John in Blackpool says, Samara, people forget that a lot of homeless people have mental and drug issues. So it's not just the case of housing them. It goes far deeper. Good day back to you, John. Yeah, that's very true. It's not just sort of a blanket, here's 320 million quid and no one's homeless ever again. And this is why I think that Starmer's got some very idealistic ways of running the country that unfortunately maybe as mayor might have cut it, but not as PM. It's deeply technical, and thank goodness we have someone deeply technical to talk to right now. Let's welcome Michael Simmons, economics editor at The Spectator, onto the show. Michael, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, just straight off the bat, I want to get in. Who is going to be Chancellor? You better know this. You better be on top of this.
Well, we're not certain yet because there's been this battle, hasn't there, between Ed Miliband and Shabana Mahmood. Certainly the reporting towards the end of last week was that it's looking more likely it's going to be Shabana because, you know, Andy Burnham's core team, the people giving him the closest advice, are convinced that Ed is just so unpopular, he'd become a lightning rod for criticism in the way that Rachel Reeves was the most unpopular chancellor we've had in kind of the history of polling. Well, Ed Miliband would be even worse. Then you've got his kind of net zero zealotry. So people would say, you know, we don't want this guy when we've got to be drilling in the North Sea. How does that work? So Shabana then becomes the favourite. But equally, Ed Miliband has played a pivotal role in getting Andy Burnham into number 10. So if he's not given the job, Burnham's creating a lot of enemies early on.
Absolutely. And, you know, he keeps talking about this temporary relief while he gets his plan into place. I did a massive sigh when I was listening to his speech, and he goes, I'll have the plan for you in a couple of months. It's going to be a 10-year plan. Well, I don't know. The country's in a pretty rocky state at the moment. I don't know if we have a couple months to then wait for another plan that will then take 10 years to enact. And I think that, I hope that Burnham knows we need someone extremely aggressive and tactical to be Chancellor right now. We don't need any more DEI hires or people who are going to look good, people who have lied on their CV, and, you know, people who maybe he's close with. They always say that you do need to have a very, very good working relationship with your Chancellor, but it also needs to be one of mutual respect. I honestly think Blair and Brown had it, but not so much Brown and Blair when that chasm started. But it's interesting. He promised struggling households this breathing space. So what does that actually mean? What are these measures going to look like?
Well, we'll have to wait and see, won't we? But one of the things that he's talked about, and by breathing space, he's talking about inflation and he's talking about the cost of living. But one of the things where people have been kind of, their pay has been so eaten up in the last few years has been fiscal drag. So this idea that as Chancellor, you pretend that you're not increasing income tax, but actually you are, because you freeze the threshold at which people start paying it. And therefore, you know, as people get pay rises and as inflation kind of drives that up, then you end up paying more tax. So you get dragged into a higher tax bracket. There's some suggestion that that was what he was referring to, that he might unfreeze that, he might lift the minimum amount that you start paying tax, and that would be kind of a bung for everyone in their pockets. But whatever the measure is, I think it's really interesting that he announced it kind of so clearly in his first speech before he's even decided and announced his chancellor. Because as the point you make there, this only works if they're working closely together. But that announcement suggests to me that a lot of the control over fiscal and economic policy is going to be from Burnham directly, is going to be in number 10. Now that works if your chancellor is completely on board with you and your programme. But I fear that whoever he puts into number 11 in the Treasury will quite quickly enjoy the power that gives them. And then they might be say, you know, hold on, Andy, you can't be announcing all this stuff on your own. So we could get into a situation like the Brown and Blair years where you have that kind of fighting Downing Street and Treasury, but much quicker than, you know, Burnham expects.
It seems like he is a true idealist. You make such a good point, honestly, because I think that whoever the Chancellor is not going to be a take all the candy and all the money and do whatever you want with it, sunshine and rainbows type of person. I think it needs to be a realist, someone who can keep Andy under control, because he is someone who, as we know, wants to actually kind of give everyone everything at once so that he can maintain that popularity boost that he's come in on. And I think that's obviously going to be a very short-term policy. He spoke about basically reforming the education system, making sure that more young people get into trades early on and giving everyone a council house. What does that look like?
Well, who knows what he's going to do on education. We clearly have the skills issue, specifically with apprenticeships and technical skills. So more encouragement and more funding there would make sense. But I think it's too simplistic to say, you know, the reason we have over 1 million NEETs, young people not in education, employment or training, is just because the opportunities aren't there. There's this huge mental health crisis and dependency crisis, and he's going to have to be, you know, quite hard line if he's going to wean young people away from incentives that take them away from work. The council the council house building project's a really interesting one as well, because again, it's quite ideologically driven. This idea that we must build. Everyone agrees we must build, but he wants to specifically build council houses. And to me, and I think most people looking at the economy, that's quite an inefficient way to plan your economy. What we need to do is build everything. Yes, build council houses. Yes, build affordable homes, but build mansions as well. Build really expensive houses, because all the lessons we have from economics tells us that it's just about building the total volume. If he was to build loads of more expensive houses, then wealthier people move out their existing homes, they climb further up the housing ladder, and it becomes more affordable for everyone else. And I worry that a fixation on a specific type of housing means we just don't build enough at all.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Michael. Honestly, it's like he's got this very hokey idea of Britain where everyone lives in a council flat and everyone, you know, learns a trade and that's all good. That would be fine if, I don't know, it was, you know, 1950. But unfortunately, you've got Russia, China and all the other developing countries totally biting on the bit of us and the crumbling West and also Europe. So you're completely right about that. Well, we shall have to wait and see, though, with those announcements coming probably later this afternoon. Michael Simmons, thank you so much for joining me. That's Michael Simmons, economics editor at The Spectator. Look, people are texting and calling in. It's all going off. Do join me after the break for more.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, Mr. Harry Cole, one of my favourite people, he's the editor-at-large of The Sun, he's just tweeted that he understands that Trump and Burnham are going to have a phone call. And it says, in 2021, Burnham said any UK politician who gave Trump the time of day should be ashamed. Great, that's going to make the phone call really nice. In 2017, he demanded the deeply troubling leader, referencing Trump, be banned from Westminster because of extreme views emanating from the Oval Office. He also called for the state visit to be cancelled, as many different communities who feel deeply unsettled about the president's visit to the UK, basically saying that, no, we should protect everyone else and not think about trade deals, potential billions to be made out of a nice partnership between the UK and the US. It's ridiculous, honestly. It's his rabid lefty past is coming up, and we are seeing it right now. I just wonder how that phone call is going to go. I actually was on Harry's show, and I predicted that it might be kind of like Zoran Mamdani, who's that mayor of New York, where I think Burnham might be able to charm Trump because he's had enough time to kind of see how Trump's operating in this second term and figure out exactly how to make things lovely. But God, if that special relationship that doesn't exist anymore, really, is going to survive, Burnham's going to have to bring out the big guns. He's going to have to actually charm the hell out of President Trump during that phone call. So let's wait and see how that goes. And while we're waiting, let's talk to Lord Prem Sikka. He's a former Labour peer. Oh, she is a Labour peer, an accountant, an academic. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Well, you've probably got much more of an insight into this. How's that phone call going to go between Trump and Burnham?
Well, that's real politics, isn't it? So therefore be careful what you say if you have aspirations for high office. But I'm sure they'll patch up the differences and find some common ground, if there is such a thing.
Tell you what, I thought that when Burnham came in, you know, he might just go with what Starmer was, you know, what he lined out 2 years ago, go with the normal mandate. It seems like he's taken that mandate and thrown it out of number 10. Genuinely, it's a completely different governmental structure that he wants to kind of put into place. Why the hell should we be trusting Labour right now when we basically coronated someone that only 25,000 people voted for, and he's come in with a completely different plan of decentralised government? Why should we trust you guys?
I think first thing is we don't elect prime ministers in this country. We elect political parties, and then the political parties elect their leaders, and that's how Burnham has reached Downing Street. But I think Burnham's first speech so far is more in line with historical trajectory of Labour rather than where Keir Starmer was. For example, Burnham's already said he's going to focus on homelessness. That is something traditionally Labour has been interested in. He's interested in well-being of your average person by dealing with the cost of living crisis, which arises from low wages, low incomes, regressive taxation, profiteering by companies, whether it is water, energy, housing, and so on. That is very much in line with traditional trajectory of Labour, as well as focusing on deindustrialization. And that is why we have a real crisis for the young people, because many new jobs simply aren't out there. That's why we have lots of regional inequalities, and young people in the regions, especially the further north you go in England, are really struggling and they need help. So I think Burnham's approach so far is very much in line with the historical trajectory. And that is what Starmer-led government really missed.
I mean, look, he spoke about breathing space in his speech this morning. Breathing space is not an economic strategy. I think people might be okay with Burnham if they knew about the, you know, different policies, but the only interview that he's done is one on a competing radio station and another with an ex-footballer who's got some very interesting views on things. Look, which elements of Burnham's cost of living package can be delivered without higher taxes? Because it's all looking pretty aspirational to me.
I think it need not be higher taxation. It's a case of recalibrating the tax system. Statistics as they stand now show that the bottom 20% of the UK population pay a higher proportion of their income in direct and indirect taxes compared to the richest 20%. So what we need to do is relieve some pressure on people at the bottom, for example, by abolishing, let us say, the VAT on domestic fuel, by increasing personal allowances, and whatever the cost of that is, that can be addressed by dealing with tax anomalies. Just to give you some examples, capital gains are taxed at a lower rate than wages. That doesn't seem to be fair. Dividends are taxed at a lower rate than wages. That doesn't seem to be fair. The partners of big accountancy firms, law firms, who collect millions of pounds in profits and salaries and wages, so the partners of these firms don't pay. Their firm does not pay the employer's national insurance. Because
we've had millions of these people leave under Starmer's government because they absolutely feel like they've been squeezed to the point where they do have to leave the country because of the taxes. I mean, why vilify millionaires who pay into the system and employ loads of people? You talk about dividends from companies. Companies are who employ the people that Burnham is trying to get back on the job market. Why should we be penalising them?
I think companies will not be able to employ anyone or make profits unless people have good spending power. And the real problem is that the bottom 50% spending power has been shrinking. Their share of economic pie has been shrinking. Just to look at one statistic, around about 1975, the gross value added, which is kind of national income, of gross value added going to workers was about 71.7%. It is around 59% now. So the workers' share of the economic pie has been shrinking. That needs to be addressed. And that is not something Burnham's going to be able to do overnight, because there are many causes of that. But so companies can't make profit. Millionaires can't stay rich if people's purchasing power is shrunk. And let me also remind you that out there are groups called patriotic millionaires who are urging the government to increase taxes upon them, because they're really concerned that when people are ignored, they are left outside the system. That makes a country and economy very dysfunctional.
The patriotic millionaires, yes, with their suicidal empathy, just going and chucking money at the system. A lot of people don't want to pay into the system in the first place because they think that it is all spent in very useless ways. Can you name one major Burnham promise that does create wealth before it does distribute it?
I think they all create wealth, for example.
Just name one. I'd just love to know one.
Well, making sure that young people are looked after so that young people can then become productive workers. They are not disheartened.
It's not a policy.
Well, it is a policy, because you've got to enable people to earn and work. You can reindustrialize Britain. Reindustrialization means we invest more in future technologies. If you look at the statistics, US, China, India are making huge investments in the semiconductor industry, making huge investment in rare earth minerals, which is what we need. And at the moment, we are almost entirely dependent for these things on companies from abroad. And that would again generate jobs in the UK, again generate investment. Because the real problem has been, you know, when you talk about wealth generation, if you look over the last 30 years, in that period, we have had really low rates of interest, really low bank interest rates, really low rates of inflation. But the UK has been at the bottom or near the bottom of the OECD and G7 league of investment in productive assets. Why is that? Basic reason for that is that people don't have, large sections of our society don't have enough purchasing power. So that is what so far Burnham's indicated.
It's really interesting because in the last 30 years, Burnham actually has been in government for about 16 of them. He served in Blair's government, so it's interesting he was kind of part of that. I just don't understand how he's been characterised as an outsider with all that. But look, I mean, you make some really good points about the fact that we are in economic disrepute, and also the fact that, you know, our GDP per capita is the same as Mississippi, and that's a problem. That's a big problem that Burnham is coming in to face. Do you think he'll be able to solve this issue, and who do you think will be the next Chancellor? Because I think that's the most important role that he's appointing today.
Well, what he said today is very encouraging, so I've got to give him the plus marks for that, and I'm certainly pleased he's going to put extra money to help homeless people. Who's going to be the next Chancellor? I do not know who it is going to be. Frankly, I am less interested in the personalities for that position. What I'm interested in is what their policies are going to be. I do note Burnham has said he will more or less stick to the fiscal rules. I think that could be highly problematical because so far, ever since these fiscal rules came about, we've been trying to manage the economy with some magic numbers, not saying what the social economic targets are. Fiscal rules not accompanied by any target to do with employment, reduction in poverty, and so on. So we can't manage by magic numbers, and these fiscal rules aren't really written in stone. We know, for example, when the banks crashed, those fiscal rules completely went out of the window. So I think the fiscal rules, though he may well be trying to assure some people in the market or playing to a particular gallery, but I think the fiscal rules need to be looked at in more detail as to what exactly they are really going to achieve.
We could talk about fiscal rules all day as my eyes start to glaze over. Why don't we talk to someone who's in the real world, someone called Alan from North Yorkshire. Alan, welcome to the show. You're on with me and Lord Prem Sikka.
Hi, yeah, this is
What did you have to say to Lord Sikka?
This is a much less cultural person than the Lord, but nevertheless, what I think is a great idea is that we need to release kids from school who are clearly never, ever, ever going to be doing a job of whatever. They're going to go into their dad's business. They're going to be a farmer's son. They're going to take the farm over. As in my case, as a mechanic apprentice, my son joined me when he left school. Now we're compelling these kids to stay at school. We need more vocational education in this country. We need more vocational opportunities so that kids who are clearly, like me, I mean, I thought a cosine in maths was a sign to go to the co-op. I mean, I didn't know what a cosine was and I had less interest in it. But that's what I want to say. We need to get...
That's kind of what Burnham actually alluded to in his speech, right?
Is it?
Yes. Lord Sikka, would you like to answer that? That's kind of your new government policy. You want to get people out of universities and into vocations.
Well, he sort of hinted at that, but obviously not everybody can go to a family business. People need all kind of different skills. If you want to be a doctor, for example, you're talking about years and years of studies. If you're trying to be an engineer, it is similar. Just because, you know, some people don't do well at school doesn't mean that there is no future for them. I don't normally talk about myself, but when I was classified as a backward child at school, and I left without any old-fashioned GCE, O-levels, A-levels. I left school. I worked during the day. I studied at night time, got myself O-levels, A-levels, degrees, masters, PhDs, the lot. Became a professor some 30 years ago and survived the world. And I'm not alone. There are many others like me. So I think there is definitely a role for university education. And that does not mean that we don't need to pay attention to vocational education. It's very important because we need plumbers, electricians, we need builders, we need carpenters, we need many other skills as well. So I think there needs to be a recalibration of the education system in that context.
See, I find that really impressive about the way that you lifted yourself up. And that's also what I find really hypocritical about why Andy Burnham is constantly going after Thatcher, because that is someone that he completely mobilised himself under. I think only under Thatcher could he have come from a very working class background. You know, his mother was a receptionist and his father was a telecommunications officer. He had a very normal upbringing, and he was able to mobilise himself, go off to Cambridge, study, do what he did, and now eventually today he's just become Prime Minister of this country. Yet he spends all his time vilifying that government that wanted him to go and do that and go and have some aspiration and do better for himself. Why do you think, while you've got countries like India, which are educating millions upon millions of people in STEM subjects, does Burnham want us all to become builders, plumbers and electricians, which I've got a lot of time for, but I also think that he's got this strange vision where it's like a 50-50 split. I just don't think that we'll be able to keep up with the rest of the world with that sort of mentality.
I think we need skilled people at all levels. Everything is skillful, whether you're an engineer or a plumber. Anyone try to do plumbing?
Totally.
But they can't do it. So we need all different kind of skills. We need a diverse economy to serve different things. So I don't think it is that. I don't think that Burnham is saying anything different. You mentioned Thatcher. I think we are still suffering to a certain extent from the Thatcherite policies. Thatcher, for example, destroyed, in my view, many public services. And this is the consequence now. You know, we've never been able to roll back. We can see the problem with the water industry, problem with energy industry, where we are paying almost...
Because government-run services run so well in this country.
Well, certainly when you say government-run things, there are different ways of running government services that don't have to be run by civil servants. You can still have professional management, but without necessarily the need to line the pockets of shareholders, as we've seen with water companies for the last 37 years. And that is, again, one reason why investment is low. Water companies have not invested enough. And when you look at the energy companies, look at, for example, National Grid, nearly £28 billion in dividends since privatization. And what happened recently? We got a heat wave and the solar farms were told, well, they're going to be turned off because our transmission system can't cope with it, and we haven't got adequate electricity storage system. Wind farms been told to turn off turbines because, again, our transmission system and the storage system can't cope with extra electricity. And at that point, we are paying gas companies to produce electricity to fill the gap.
Alan, what would you say to that?
And they're charging up to 180.
Let's bring in our caller Alan here to see what he thinks about that.
I just think that both my grandsons have done an apprenticeship. They're in their early 20s.
Yeah.
And they're earning shed loads of money.
That's true. That's
and
true.
My son, I haven't got a grey cell in my head, and I'll tell you what, there's a lot of people who'd like my pension that I'm getting at the moment. I'm 80 years old. And I've worked all my life, and like the Lord, I was told that I would never make anything in life. Well, I've had several businesses throughout my life. I've sold cars. I had a delicatessen. I had 2 delicatessens at one point, and I've sold them and I've made money. My kids got educated, and my grandchildren, they're doing fantastically. But you can't do anything until someone wants to get their backside off the sofa and get away from their wretched iPhones and wretched iPads and go out and do something. We want to create a world of doing, making.
Yes.
We started the Industrial Revolution by making things and creating work. And that's what we've got to do now, I think, anyway.
I couldn't agree with you more, Alan. Those are very inspirational words. Maybe I wish you were sworn in as PM today. I feel like you'd know exactly what to do, but you've had a very long and prosperous life. Alan from North Yorkshire, thanks so much for calling in. And yeah, thank you very much, Lord Premsicker, for letting us know exactly what Burnham has in store. Goodness me. As I speak right now, Trump and Burnham are having probably a very interesting conversation. I wish I could be a fly on the wall of number 10 to know exactly what they're talking about. What do you think they are talking about? Let me know. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Give me a call, give me a text, answer the question about, you know, is Burnham going to save Britain? But if it's something else, also call about that too. I'm getting a lot of texts in, which I'll read after these messages.
I spoke to the Chief Constable of Devon and Cornwall Police 3 times. I spoke to the Prime Minister as well, and those calls took place over Friday and Saturday, and they both told me it's a burglary that's gone wrong. I said, no, it is not. A burglar does not park his car on your drive and walk into the house. And I went to Dartmoor on Saturday and I said, I have no doubt this is a premeditated murder. I received tons of abuse for saying it, but sadly, it's proved that I'm right.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Well, some breaking news. England legend Kevin Keegan has died, age 75. The former Newcastle manager's family revealed he was diagnosed with stage 4 stomach cancer in January after being admitted to hospital and ongoing abdominal problems. Kevin, he was last pictured in good spirits on May 31st. He was probably following along with the World Cup, as we all were, has sadly now passed away, surrounded by loved ones. It has been confirmed. In a very heartbreaking tribute, a close friend, Peter Graves, wrote this afternoon, "It is with immense sadness we announce Kevin Keegan has passed away at the age of 75. The former England player and manager had been battling cancer and was surrounded by his wife and daughters in his final moments. Well, I hope that they are all doing well, and that's a full life at 75, and what a life he did lead. Kevin Keegan died at 75 of stomach cancer. There you go. Well, you know, that's quite, at least he kind of maybe got to watch the final last night, one would hope. Well, on to some messages. Mark Overton, I don't want to help with the cost of living. Thank you, Mr. Burnham. I do want economic conditions to allow me to make as much money as I want to earn. This is what separates socialists from those on the right of centre. That's Mark in Norfolk, that's right. You're completely right about that, actually, honestly. I think there's a real craven socialist element to what Burnham is trying to do. And can you think of... Call me if you know of a sort of situation where socialism has worked. Or communism, for that matter. All great things in theory, but not in practice. Maybe Burnham will find out the hard way. Let's go over to Maria in Gloucestershire. Maria, welcome to the show.
Oh, hi. Hi, Samara. I didn't expect to see you.
Oh, great to hear you.
Earlier. So I've forgotten what we were talking about now.
Oh, well, I've got on your note here, Burnham. All I heard him saying is that he was reminiscing about the 1980s.
I think they got the right surname, Burnham. Anyway, sorry. What I was going to say, right, I was trying to listen to his speech, okay?
Me too.
And all I actually heard was going back to 1980s. I'm going back to the 1980s, and I'm thinking, have I drank too much bloody coffee or something? What's he on about?
No, he fantasizes about the 80s and also the 70s. He wants anything pre-Margaret Thatcher he's a fan of, which is just like everyone's unfashionable, you know, dad or uncle who's just fantasizing about a time that really, really wasn't as good as they believe it was, in my opinion. I just sometimes...
I tell you now, young lady, I used to live in the 1970s, in 1978, up north. And if you want to wake up in the morning and open your door and find rats running all over the bloody pavement because the poor old bin men haven't emptied the bloody bins for weeks.
Yeah,
you can't,
those strikes are going on.
Yeah, you can't bury your granddad because there's no grave diggers. They're all gone on strike. Yeah, not very nice, is it? You ring for an ambulance and you end up with an army Green Goddess ambulance, which actually, because we were at Walters at the time, we actually made a cocktail and called it the Green Goddess, and we made it full of vodka and mint.
Oh, that sounds quite fun, actually.
I tell you what,
where was my invite?
You needed the ambulance.
Yeah, I tell you about the 1980s in Britain. You had over 3 million people unemployed. You had the miners' strike, which thousands of coal miners went on strike. You had the riots in Brixton. You had IRA terrorism. You had the troubles going on our doorstep. You had massive wealth inequality, like huge. You had massive housing issues. Urban areas had, it looked like, a lot of urban areas just looked like squat houses. You had HIV/AIDS going around. All right, Burnham, is that what you want to get back to? Because it doesn't sound that flowery to me. I honestly, the way that he fantasizes about a time that was never that great, it's ridiculous.
Talk about Back to the Future. I think the man's on the wrong bloody planet.
Yeah, he is. He's out of this world.
You couldn't get any electric. You couldn't get NHS. You couldn't get to a doctor. There was nobody working. They didn't have anybody working. There were so many strikes. You can't believe how many strikes there were. You know.
It sounds like the government, to be honest, that he's now coming into. And that's half the problem. I think he's got a lot of issues to face. And unfortunately, I feel like someone like him, a politician like him, might have actually worked when the country was going all right, which I am struggling to find a time period where that was the case. Maybe 2012, a lot of people earmark as sort of the penultimate time for Britain. You had the Olympics, you had David Cameron came in with an actual different mandate to what he ended up delivering, but that was a whole other story that we'll keep for another time. But you're completely right. He actually does fantasize about something that doesn't exist, and that's very dangerous because he's putting into place policies like mass nationalisation and mother government in order to rectify that, and I don't think it's going to end well. Maria, thank you so much for your call. Maria in Gloucestershire. Vodka with mint. A tower of vodka and mint. Actually, I wouldn't mind one of those. Ed from Hampshire says, don't trust Andy Burnham. He'll find a way to monitor the population regardless of any digital ID announcement. Ooh, that's interesting. Yeah, I do feel like Labour is completely wanting to do that. Ian says, Samara, a Starmerite, a Burnhamite and a Trussite walk into a bar. But sadly, it has closed some months earlier due to increasing costs. Oh my God, what's he going to do about the pubs and VAT that are completely struggling over this useless Labour government? That's what I want to know. He hasn't got any sort of idea for that. I'm sure he'll be down at some sort of pub for a photo op later, but he's probably not going to talk about how to give them relief. And I've got another message here from Anthony saying, Burnham pledges a circuit breaker for Britain. I was of the understanding that a circuit breaker is designed to isolate and switch off. Tony from Ruslip, yes. Yeah, can we just turn off? That'd be quite ideal. That would be, don't turn off this radio programme. I'm getting absolute daggers from my producer behind the screen right now. But can we just turn off Britain for a bit and then turn it back on again? And will everything be OK? You know, when the printer stops working and you just switch on, switch off. I don't think so. I agree with you. This circuit breaker moment, it's sort of like, Burnham, you're the same man in a different pair of spectacles that weren't bought by Lord Ali. How are we meant to trust you? And you've not told us your plans. What type of circuit breaker is that? Well, after the break, I'll be taking more of your calls and reading more of your messages. And we have some very interesting interviews coming up. One with Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Chancellor for Reform UK. I'll be grilling him on many different things because I think that Andy Burnham is stealing a lot of reform policies. We'll see what he thinks about that after the break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Well, oh my goodness, there's a gangster in my flat. That is the top line of this absolutely insane documentary that is coming out tonight on Panorama. It's about organised criminals using rental fraud. And joining me now is someone who knows more than anything about this topic. It's Paul Champolina, founder of Landlord Action. You feature in this Panorama documentary.
Yes, I do. I give some advice about what landlords and property owners got to basically look out for, not get stung by criminality in rented properties. There's loads of scams going on, and that's what the programme tonight does a deep dive into what's going on.
What is the most scandalous thing that you interrogate in this documentary about these criminal gangsters who basically exploit the rental system?
Yeah, so firstly, it's fake IDs and getting through the fake ID and the referencing process. So you've got weed factory, cannabis factories, you have brothels, you have cuckooing, which is county lines, which happens a lot with rented properties and vulnerable people. You've got brothels, you've got professional bad tenants that go from one property to another. get in the property, trick their way in and try and stay in as long as possible. And of course, what happens is also the court system is broken, so it takes ages. So their intention is to pay no rent while they're in there, Samara. You've got fake landlords and agents, which is another big scam, where you get fake properties, you know, or somewhere that is not their property.
Yeah.
They put an advert online, and then what happens is unsuspecting tenants that don't do their due diligence and they're desperate because of a red-hot rental market, end up paying a month's rent, month's deposit. Just alone in 2025, there was almost £15 million that was scammed. And they reckon, with regard to tenant fraud, Samara, there's something like about £3 billion a year was lost. But also, there's £3 billion a year. Also, title fraud, which is rife as well. You're getting gangsters or criminals that are stealing landlords' properties, overseas landlords that have got no mortgage on it. They change their name at depot. I mean, there's a really good company called...
Don't give me any ideas.
No, don't do that. You don't want to get in prison. There's a company called Title Guardian that's really good that spots subletting. Subletting is absolutely rife, especially in cities where what happens is they go in with a fake reference or a fake company and then they put it on short-stay platforms like Airbnb, Booking.com, rent them out without the landlord's consent, and then there's a massive scam with that. So there's lots and lots of scams.
But how do these gangs defeat these supposedly reputable referencing systems? Because you talk about, in this documentary, the fact that a lot of people go through the normal method and they still get screwed over.
So, yeah, I mean, look, you have landlords that are a bit desperate that try and do it themselves. They don't use a reputable letting agent, and you should always use a reputable letting agent, and, you know, so they belong to a trade body, something like Property Mark. It's about doing your due diligence, making sure, and, you know, some of the telltale signs are like pay first, view later. You know, where they're trying to hurry up payments. Right. You've also got, if a deal sounds too good to be true, normally it is. I mean, you've got the average rent in London is something like £2,400 a month. The national average is £1,400 a month. So rents are going up. And especially young professionals, students, they're getting more and more desperate as sharers. They're trying to secure properties. Unusual payment requests where they're asking for holding deposits or rents to be paid in wire transfers, you know, like Western Union. You get fake contracts. You get verifying the property and the landlords are not the right people. And then, of course, you've got to use trusted platforms. But, you know, I've been doing this for a long, long time, and I set my business up, Landlord Action, 26 years ago, and we see fake references all the time. I think referencing's become much more... there's much more tech involved. You have open banking. I mean, when I first started my business, there was no internet. That shows how old I am.
Please.
Now you can go on social media and you can see...
It's almost worse with the internet, to be honest.
Well, yeah,
now.
But I mean, you know, you have now in... which has just finished because of the Renters' Rights Act that's come in, you would have had to right to rent, so you would have to check out to make sure someone's got the right to be in this country before they can rent out a property.
Do you have a lot of people who are here illegally trying to rent properties and then squat in them? Is that a thing?
So yeah, of course. The problem is you've got a black market with regard to cheaper rents because, of course, renting is so expensive. People can't rent units, they can't rent flats, so they've got to do bed-sits, which is HMOs. So, of course, the regulation and the compliance now, and there's much more regulation landlords, they've got to go through a whole load of compliance and a lot of hoops they've got to rent to. But
what are the warning signs that landlords should look out for?
So the warning signs are, if you get a tenant in, what's their referencing? Does it match up? Make sure you pay a referencing agent. You know, you can pay £30 for a reference to take place. Takes the best part of 2 to 3 days max. Right. You've got to make sure, is the affordability there? Are they working at the place they're working at? Go on their social media, speak to a previous landlord. Actually, we get landlords that go to the current property the tenant's renting at, so they can see they're actually living at a property. But you
I'm
get
just
fake
seeing breaking news, just quickly, because since I've got you in studio, Steve Reed has been sacked as the housing minister.
Steve Reed. Well, when you have 16 housing ministers...
Breaking news right now.
When you have 16 housing ministers in 13 years... That's part of the problem that we have in our housing industry. Yeah. They're not there long enough. There actually should be a housing... there should be a housing working group with people that are in the industry and not of a political colour. That's why we can't build the 300,000 properties a year, which we always say we're going to build. And that goes way back to the Conservatives.
So you think this is... Now we're back to square one, now that Steve Reed's out.
We are back to square one. We're always back to square one. It's really frustrating.
Yeah,
and that's why people can't get on the housing ladder. That's why I think there's also a little bit of an anti-landlord feeling by tenants, where a lot of landlords are just normal people. But we need to build, and we need more social housing, and that's our biggest problem.
And Burnham referenced that in his speech today. He said he wants to build more council houses, which, you know, I'm not wholly against, to be honest. I just don't want him to cut down people who are aspirational in the process of it, you know.
Well, of course, there's got to be a balance. But I think something like there was only 6,000 council properties built last year, social housing. We've got a population of almost 70 million people. That's part of the problem. Affordability is a big issue, and cost of living is a big issue.
Massively.
Massive.
Can I ask what the worst tenant you've ever seen is?
Oh, God, how long we got? I know you've got to go to a break in a minute. So, you know, our business, last year alone, we did almost 5,000 instructions.
Oh, my goodness.
We had one tenant that owed £170,000 rent arrears, right?
Wow.
We had a serial bad tenant that cost 6 landlords £148,000. We've had murders, we've had loads. I don't want to put people off. We've had high-profile cases. When you do as many cases we have subletting scams. We've had some horrendous cannabis factories that have trashed properties, and of course the oldest profession in the book, which is prostitution. We have a lot of brothels. I don't visit them. You'd be pleased. No.
Good. No market research.
No market research alone. I just sit behind a desk.
Look, the Panorama. When's it coming out? When can people tune in tonight? Because that just sounds juicy, whatever that is. I mean, I love a flat story. I have to say, I know it's hell when you're in the process,
but I always say to landlords and the wider public, my job is to make people streetwise when it comes to renting, and I do that, and I've been doing that for years. So it's 8 o'clock tonight on BBC One Panorama, and yeah, it would be telltale times or telltale tips of not what to do.
Yes. Don't do that. Don't murder someone in your property.
No, don't
turn it into a brothel or a weed den or whatever. But do tune into Panorama.
But if you want to come to my office and you can see even more juicy stories, you can do.
I was wondering where that was going, Paul. The darkness under the lamp, as they would say. No, I'm joking. Paul Champolina, thank you so much, and do tune in tonight to the Panorama doco. He's the founder of Landlord Action. And just lastly, while I've got you in studio, a Burnham government. What does it mean for your job and your activism?
What does it mean, a Burnham government? So, look, I don't know. I think that we
Take your time. We've got some time.
I think what happens is I think that the government needs to support housing in a bigger way. Talk is cheap. The biggest problem we've got, especially in cities, especially London, there's land bank and not enough developers are building because it costs too much.
Yes.
I think that there should be more concessions for landlords to stay in the market. Make sure that, you know, landlords want good tenants. Tenants want good landlords. We want them to stay in the property as long as possible. But yeah, the big crux of the problem that we have in the private rental sector is because of the social housing sector. We don't build enough social properties, and it falls in the private rental sector. So I just hope that Andy Burnham listens. That's really important.
Yeah, it seems like he is trying to, at least.
He's only been he's been in the office for an hour.
Yeah. Yeah, where are the houses, Andy? God, if you built them already. No, but yeah, Steve Reed's out, so he's clearly wanting to do something with your sector. And that's quite positive in my opinion.
I'd like someone with experience that knows housing.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe not Angela Rayner again.
That's not
please no.
Yeah.
Paul, thank you so much for coming in. And we will take more calls and messages after the break, and we'll also be chatting to Robert Jenrick of Reform UK. That after these messages.
I spoke to the Chief Constable of Devon and Cornwall Police 3 times. I spoke to the Prime Minister as well, and those calls took place over Friday and Saturday, and they both told me it's a burglary that's gone wrong. I said, no, it is not. A burglar does not park his car on your drive and walk into the house. And I went to Dartmoor on Saturday and I said, I have no doubt this is a premeditated murder. I received tons of abuse for saying it, but sadly, it's proved that I'm right.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Right, well, the dominoes are falling. Steve Reed's been sacked as Housing Secretary. That's a very interesting choice and honestly probably a good one, you know. Most people probably wouldn't even know who Steve Reed is, but if your council flat's got black mould or you're trying to get on the housing ladder and you can't, he was probably standing in the way of it with not doing anything on policy. So there you go. Maybe Burnham is trying to do something a little different and he's starting with housing, but we're going to see those dominoes fall over this afternoon. We're probably going to see a lot of people replaced in the front cabinet, and Burnham's going to make some changes that, to be honest, a lot of us didn't vote for in the first place. But let's not let facts get in the way of a good story. Let's go over to Robert Jenrick, Member for Parliament and from Reform UK. Robert, thanks so much for joining us.
Good to see you.
You said Andy Burnham should call a general election. Reform wants a general election. He's ruled that out. Is this kind of an illegitimate parliament right now?
Well, you're absolutely right that we've got a Prime Minister who's come in, didn't even stand at the last general election, has been elected by a tiny number of people, claims that he's going to bring about a big change for this country, but has no mandate for that. If he's going to shake things up, certainly if he's going to increase people's taxes, which is what I think is going to happen, because remember, he said that there's room for movement on tax, and in the past he said he supports £38 billion or £3,500 for every family in this country in new taxes. Then, you know what, test that with the people, see what the public have to say about it. And I suspect that people will conclude that they want real change, and that is going to come with a reform government, not with this reheated platitudes from Andy Burnham.
But is a reform government ready? I mean, you haven't been able to win the last couple of by-elections. Candidate-wise, I don't think you guys are there yet. Are you ready? And is Burnham going to be a massive threat to you? I mean, he's taking policies like nationalising steel, which honestly was an original reform policy, and he's using them. And he's also scrapping digital ID, something that a lot of the reform base called for. Is he taking what he wants and basically demolishing you guys in the way?
No, look, I listened to his speech on the steps of Number 10, and look, I wish him well for the sake of the country, but I didn't hear a plan at all. I heard a load of platitudes and waffle, but nothing concrete as to how we're actually going to fix the huge challenges that we're facing at the moment. And remember, Andy Burnham actually asked Keir Starmer for more time to become Prime Minister. He asked Starmer to hang on for a few weeks because he had so little preparation. There's all these internal divisions. He's saying that he might sign off some old oil and gas licences, but not any new ones. He says that there's a problem with welfare, but he hasn't got any solutions to the ballooning welfare bill. He says he's worried about the cost of living, but he won't rule out big increases to working people's taxes. It feels like he's all over the place. This is going to be chaotic. this is not going to fix the underlying problems facing the country. The only way to do that is to get a Prime Minister in who's got a very clear sense of direction. And that is Nigel Farage. We will be ready for the general election. We've already set out a whole raft of policies on the issues that really matter to people, like the economy, like crime, like immigration, and there's more to come. And I just say this. One of the things that was not even mentioned by Andy Burnham on the steps of Number 10 was immigration. And I think that's very, very telling. You know, this is an issue that matters to millions of people in the country. The small boats are still coming every day, and there was nothing from Andy Burnham on that. That says that he doesn't care about the issue and he's not going to do anything to secure our borders.
Exactly, and Makerfield really wasn't on the footstep of an immigration crisis. It's a place that is quite unblemished by a lot of the problems that the rest of Britain has, and that's why it is a bit ridiculous that he's just been able to stroll into Number 10. Look, Robert, you've been in these rooms while these shuffles go on since you were a former Tory. What is going on right now, and what's your prediction for the new cabinet?
Well, you have to ask Andy Burnham that, but it sounds like he's booting out some of the worst performers from the last cabinet, or at least as far as he sees it. We've heard that Steve Reid has been sacked. Remember, he's the one who illegally cancelled millions of people's votes in May. Elections that ultimately went ahead because Nigel Farage took Steve Reid to court and forced a U-turn on the eve of the court case at the High Court. And then some new people will come in, or people will be brought back. The people who we've heard might be on the way back include Louise Haigh, a convicted criminal coming in some kind of senior role, Angela Rayner, who had to resign because there was this scandal over her stamp duty. You know, this is a pretty depressing group of people who are going to be brought in to run this country. And the two people who are supposedly competing to be Chancellor are Red Ed Miliband, who's impoverished people with his net zero zealotry and deindustrialised the country with sky-high energy prices, and the markets and the union seem to hate, quite right too. Or Shabana Mahmood, who's actually been campaigning against getting the job in recent weeks, saying she wants to stay on at the Home Office, who has said almost nothing about the economy for her 16 years in Parliament and doesn't seem to have the faintest idea what she would do. So these are unenviable choices. And again, just leads me to the view, Andy Burnham doesn't have a plan. This is going to be more of the same. The country's just going to keep going down and down and down when we're crying out for real change to turn this thing around and put the country onto a strong footing again.
Well, you're crying out for real change. I think Burnham is starting to deliver a bit of real change. David Lammy is out as the Justice Secretary and Deputy PM. Bye-bye, David Lammy, probably one of the most woefully incompetent people to ever take that position in office. Peter Kyle has just been sacked as Business Secretary. This guy is moving and shaking. I'm not going to lie. I mean, genuinely. Who is going to be the Chancellor? You're the Shadow Chancellor of Reform. Who is going to be the one that's up against you? Is it going to be Shabana Mahmood, Robert?
Well, look, as I say, I don't know. The two names are Red Ed Miliband or Shabana Mahmood. It's a pretty bad choice, isn't it? Someone who has pursued the most job-destroying policy of net zero, or someone who has said nothing about the economy at all. And look, when your economy is as weak as ours, when people's wages are stagnating, their bills are going through the roof, factories are closing, unemployment is rising every month, there's 1 million young people out of work, you don't just want somebody who has been pushed into this job, who had no idea what to do about it. You want someone with a real plan and drive and determination to fix the country. That's what Reform has. We're going to go for cheap energy. We're going to cut people's energy bills by 300 quid by scrapping all the green levies and taxes. We're going to put British workers first by getting rid of Rachel Reeves' job-destroying employers' national insurance for British workers, paid for by a levy on migrant labour. We're going to get this economy going again, and I see no sign of that happening under our new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham.
Reform's had a pretty rocky time. Just lastly, what's the biggest mistake that they've made this year?
Look, you say that, but we're leading in the opinion polls. Have been
Bit of a
for the last
Burnham bump, though,
300
Robert.
or so cases. Is there?
They're at the five points.
I haven't seen
5
that.
points, apparently.
Well, they're still behind. Look, it's never going to be easy. What we're trying to do here is supplant a 200-year-old Tory party, which failed the country, a 100-year-old Labour Party that's failed the country, and to bring about a massive change. That's why the establishment, their acolytes in the media, are chucking everything they can at Nigel and this party, because they don't want that change. They want more of the same. Well, we're not backing down. Nigel certainly isn't backing down. We're just getting started. We are going to fight Andy Burnham and Labour every step of the way, and we are ready for that general election. We've got candidates, we've got great policies, we've got the team in place, and I want to see us win that election and bring about the change that people really want to get this country going again.
Day one, as the Chancellor, if Reform wins, what are you actually going to do, Robert? What's the first thing you're going to do?
Well, I've already said some of the things we're going to do. Take 300 quid off everyone's energy bills in this country by getting rid of VAT on domestic energy and getting rid of all the green taxes and levies that have been ladled on by stealth to those bills in recent times. Number two, we're going to lift the ban on oil and gas licenses, old and new, so we can create thousands of jobs, get loads of tax revenue, help our energy security. We're going to bring in a bill to put British workers first, getting rid of the employer's national insurance that Rachel Reeves put in place, but for British workers, so the good British businesses that are putting Brits first get a big tax cut for doing so, and we're less reliant on foreign labour. Those are just some of the things that we're going to do in our first 100 days, and we're going to be saying more about that in the weeks to come.
Speaking of 100 days, just quickly, how long has Burnham got in your mind? How long is he going to be in power?
Well, we want a general election, don't we? So, Nigel, myself, we've been very clear. Bring on that... Well, let's wait and see. Bring on that general election. There's no mandate for this. And then let's have an election, not just in Clacton, but in every single constituency in the country. If Burnham wants to raise your taxes, let's see what the people have to say about that.
Well, you guys need to focus on winning that Manchester mayoral election and potentially Clacton first. Thank you so much, Robert Jenrick. That's Robert Jenrick, Shadow Chancellor, Reform UK. My goodness, Kev,
hello,
how the
Samara.
tables have turned.
Oh, look, I've just dropped my running order already. Good start for today. It's been a terrible day so far. Why shouldn't it get worse? I mean, Andy Burnham still spewing this clapped out 70s socialist claptrap.
It's
I think
scary.
the most